morning, everyone. Welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolf. That's the Hall of Famer Chris Carter. This is Nick Wright. How's everybody doing today?
Doing great. CC, I got a little bit of bad news that you're not privy to yet. Jenna Wolf is in a tough spot right now. Jenna Wolf won a bet last night. With me. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know what's a bad thing and what's a bad sign? And Chris Carter, you'll know what I'm talking about here. When you lose a bet, you feel terribly. This morning, winning the bet, your emotion was, oh, I should have bet more.
I'm turning into...
Oh, she's hooked now.
What are they called? Bettors?
When the winning bets don't feel good because you didn't bet enough, that's the beginning of reeling you on in.
I was a normal, healthy person before I met your partner over here. My partner over here.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Right?
Added to the graveyard.
He has just infected all of us with this. All I'm going to tell you is this.
Yeah, Nick Wright, too much of Nick Wright can decline the quality of your life.
That's not true. You know what the truth is, Nick?
What's
My
up?
life is better because you're in it.
Oh, thank you very much,
Better.
Jenna Wolf.
Even
Congrats
more
on
better
that
because
win.
you're in it. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
It feels
your
good.
Celtics played tonight, by the way, 1-point home underdog, just letting you know.
I know.
We'll talk more about that later.
All right, we just got to move it on in my ear, even though all I want to do is talk about how I need to make my money back. Let's start off our NBA coverage explaining the concept of friendship since we just started it. You know, if Nick's out sick, CC steps up. If CC's sick, Nick steps up. If I'm sick, we're all screwed.
Correct.
Rockets, Jazz, Game 5. James Harden, a little bit sick, not feeling great, so who steps up? His on-court BFF, Chris Paul. Stepping up big. Wow, what a night for Chris Paul. 41 points, 20 of those points in the fourth quarter. He also had 10 assists, 0 turnovers, best game of the postseason career for him. Monkey off back, I would say. Rockets are in the conference finals. Here is James Harden on Chris Paul's performance.
Unbelievable. I mean, you know, he went out there and took over the game, you know, and especially for an opportunity like, you know, he's never had before, he went to go get it. You know, he put us all on his back and said, listen, you know, I got us. That's big time right there. It's a big time performance. He got in his bag and you know, he called everybody off. He said, "You get out the way. I'm gonna put us on his back." He had that look in his eyes.
Here you go.
I mean, if he has a, I don't care what you say, but you know, and if he has that look in his eyes, you know, every single night, he's a problem.
This is one of those stories that you're happy after the game. Yes, you can talk about the win, but it's nice that there was a story being weaved throughout this, and it was Chris Paul. CC, does Chris Paul's really just an amazing game change, his Game 5 change your perception of the arc of his career?
It's not going to change my perception, but I think it's a good question because there are people out there that would like to say that Chris Paul, he's been the type of player that should have gotten to a finals by now. It's not going to change my opinion. I've always thought he's a phenomenal player. He's been in some special situations that I wouldn't think. I didn't determine after those situations Chris Paul's not a clutch player. But when you don't get to a conference final, that's what they're going to do in the NBA. If you're a dominant player, because you're on the court so much in the playoffs, they give you more credit and more responsibility for the wins and the losses. And Chris Paul typically being the best player on all the teams he's been on. But what he did last night was phenomenal. Because with the spotlight being on Houston as far as the coach, there's question marks. Can he get it done? This team, even with 65 wins, can they get it done? Chris Paul, is he really a clutch player? You know, James Harden, is he clutch? So for me, it was phenomenal to see, and it was phenomenal to see the league MVP take the back seat. Didn't mind. And that was something I didn't think Harden had in his game until Chris Paul was added to the Houston Rockets. So it was phenomenal to see someone like Chris Paul, because knowing Chris Paul, knowing his family and everything, he's a great guy, all right? Now, he's got a reputation with some of the coaches and teammates that he might rub them a little bit the wrong way, but off the court, he's got a great reputation. It's nice to see him get some playoff success.
He is a great guy and a great player. I believe when it is all said and done for Chris Paul, there will be 2 point guards, Magic and Oscar, clearly better than him, and then you will be able to make an argument for him versus everybody else. Stockton, Isaiah, Kidd, Steph, Nash, whomever, Iverson, whomever you love. I think Chris Paul has been on that type of trajectory since basically, year 2 in New Orleans, since his amazing early success when he almost won a league MVP when his second best player was David West. But you couldn't disregard the fact that no player in the history of the NBA had played more playoff games without making a conference finals. That was there. That was a real thing. No matter what the advanced metrics say about him, no matter what all his teammates say about him, no matter what the eye test says about him, to be that great and to never make the Final Four was going to be a problem for him.
So it's like he was the best player in golf. He's the best player not to win a major.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's the way we could look at it.
Absolutely, because right now I don't know if people would say Chris is the best player to never win a championship, but he certainly was, in my eyes, the greatest player in league history to never make a conference finals. And so, Jenna, the fact that he made it, but made it the way he did, with the greatest offensive quarter of his career. Never had he scored 20 in a quarter before last night. The first 40-point, 10-assist, 0 turnover game in NBA playoff history, right? It had never happened before. So for him to make it and make it that way, I felt great about it because I do love this player, and I think he's deserved some postseason success.
So we know the 41 points, and it stands out, and the 20 points in the quarter, and that stands out, and that's great. How underrated is Chris Paul defensively?
Oh, he's an amazing defensive player. I think that when people talk about Chris Paul, that's one of the calling cards that we don't talk about it because he's in the West and now he's with Houston. But when you talk about Chris Paul and the people that know basketball, when they talk about Chris Paul, they pull out the point you, Jenna. One of the top defenders in the league and had been for over 10 years. People don't talk about that, though. They like to talk about his lack of success. They talk about him and Doc Rivers not being able to get it done with the Clippers. But Chris Paul as a defender. Now, as we move on to the conference finals, we're getting ready to see. Because him and Harden versus Klay and Steph. And not only Houston's ability to be able to close games a different way, which they did last night with Chris Paul, their ability to be able to defend the backcourt of Golden State is better than ever.
And on the defensive point, which is a great point to bring up, because if you're not a rim defender, we don't have a lot of great metrics, counting stats or advanced stats to quantify how good you are defensively. There's the steals category, but some people would say a lot of the guys with the average of most steals are some of the worst defenders because it means they're gambling, they're out of position. Chris Paul, when we talk about the Rockets making the huge jump defensively between last year and this year, it is not just P.J. Tucker and your guy, Luc Richard Mbah a Moute. It's the best defensive point guard of a generation. That's who Chris Paul has been. First-team All-NBA defense year in, year out. And you don't always get what you deserve in sports, but Chris Paul a few years ago hit a buzzer beater in Game 7 to beat the Spurs. And I thought, okay, well, that will remove all of the choker stuff from him. But it didn't. They blow a 3-1 lead.
Yep.
He had the tough series against OKC at the end. And so now this does remove it. Now we can say there's a lot of really good players who haven't been to the finals in this league. There weren't players at this level that hadn't been to the conference finals.
Right. And even if they aren't able to get through Golden State, I don't think the same commentary that followed Chris Paul after hitting the game winner, I don't think it will follow him after facing one of the best teams that we've seen in the conference final in Golden State, with them being in their 4th straight conference final.
100%.
You also have to look at this as a win for Houston to be able to do what they did without James Harden really stepping up, without
that's why
having
you get him.
Yeah.
That's why you go get Chris Paul, because you are, even if you're a guy, every superstar in the league except LeBron has a history of about once a series they're going to lay a dud. You know what I mean? Whether it's Steph, whether it's KD, no matter whomever you are. And Harden has a more tattered history than that. A couple times a series he might have a bad game. That's even if he's fully healthy. Chris Paul revealed yesterday that he was a little under the weather. But that's why you go get him, Chris.
Yes.
So you can win this game, because I don't want people to underrate this. This is a game the Rockets were trailing going into the 4th quarter.
Yes.
If they lose that game, and they have to go to Utah for Game 6, we're talking a totally different situation right now. We're bringing up the 3-1. We're talking about a pick'em Game 6, and then all of a sudden, what really is the situation for the Rockets?
Yeah, Chris Paul, he'll look back on this season with a lot of accomplishments. But the most important thing for me personally is what he did. He came over. We went to watch him play against Brooklyn.
Yes.
And I hollered at him on the court, "Hey, Chris Paul, I need a picture after the game." He stopped what he was doing and was like, "I need a picture too." And
awesome.
Nick's wife, Danielle, had the jersey on. So him coming over this season is one of many accomplishments.
It was great. And he is, I'm glad you mentioned it. He's my wife's all-time favorite player. He took time with her, thanks to Chris Carter. But no, the things you hear about Chris Paul off the court are 100% accurate.
That's great.
Like one of the NBA's really good guys.
All right, the Rockets can sit back. Now they're on to the Western Conference Finals. Coming up, are the Warriors still on cruise control through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs? We'll set that table next on First Things First. We'll get to the Warriors in just a second, but first are those 2 words. Jazz, Rockets, Game 5, Donovan Mitchell. Tough basket gets it to fall and one.
I've never in my life watching professional basketball seen a rookie that can go from having a mediocre or even bad game to just incandescent in a quarter. Did you have 2 22-point quarters in one playoff run?
Now, I was getting ready to say something. I had a tremendous comment, but you threw a word on me. Incandescent?
So hot, on fire.
Like the light bulbs.
Yeah, like glowing brightly. All right, I won't use it.
What
next
about
time.
he's damn good?
Thank you.
Yeah. Tomato.
No. Same game, Alec Burks drives, baseline, throws down.
In college
Big
last
one.
Year. I think they were on Teach Those Words that last year.
I don't know about it, Ohio State. He was good for them yesterday.
Be offended by that.
Oh, no, it's all good. He knows. And Binghamton either. Come on.
I'm offended by that. Now you lost your chance to speak. Same game, Gerald Green with the steal.
Boom.
Vicious fast break dunk. Rockets are moving on to the Western Conference Finals, boys.
This was the thing. I'm not surprised that Houston, the team, like they love Gerald Green, but I was really shocked, Nick, at the conversation we had with Houston's owner, how much he personally loves Gerald Green and realizing the value he brings to that team.
Same game, CP3 said hello. The owner could not stop talking about Gerald Green.
Yeah, I had to get a lot of information. Didn't know when I was going to run into him again.
The other Game 5 last night, Pelicans at Warriors, and Drew Holiday with the spin and impossible dime in traffic. Look at that.
Man,
his reputation changed after these 2 playoff series you saw with Drew Holiday?
Yeah, listen, he's a guy that had been somewhat disappointing due to injury. And now when you see him healthy, you see one of the better 2-way guards in the league and a guy who you think, could he be the 3rd best guy? Not the 2nd best guy, 3rd best guy on a champion? Maybe.
All right, let's take a deeper dive into this game. Warriors and Pelicans, Game 5, deeper dive. High five. Golden State's 4 stars combined for 94 of their 113 points. 94! As the Warriors cruise to a win and a gentleman's sweep, Steph Curry leading the way with 28 points. It is just his 4th game back from his knee injury. Here's his teammate on getting Steph returning to form.
I think Coach did a great job, though, just, giving him a little bit here and there. And then tonight, really just letting him go. And you see, when you let the dog off the leash, what happens.
I feel good. I feel confident what I'm able to do out there. Timing can still get a little bit better with the ball and things like that when you start to get so excited. Still, like, when I'm out there and missing 6 weeks, it's still appreciative of just being out there playing. So, yeah, like I said, I continue to get better, continue to get my timing right, continue to get back to the normal rotations, normal, minutes that I'm out there playing, and hopefully won't look back.
It's nice to see what Steph Curry can do when he's just in the process of trying to get himself back into it. That's not bad, even if he stopped right there. Do you think, CC, that we've seen the Warriors at their absolute best yet?
No, I don't think. Back to what Kevin Durant said. A question to you guys. If Steph Curry was a dog, what kind of dog would he be?
Oh,
because he said he let the dog
Labradoodle?
off the... What kind of dog? He'd be a nice dog, right?
Some kind of a poodle.
I thought you really wanted an actual dog name. I apologize. Go ahead, as you were.
No problem. I just thought that was
okay. Yeah,
me and being a dog lover.
Oh yeah, you being a dog lover, absolutely.
Let the dog off the leash. Steph Curry, what he brings to Golden State, it's you can't speak about it just one thing, because what he does for Draymond, what he does for Clay, the lack of pressure on Kevin Durant, where he's able to thrive. But the question is, have we seen their best? No, absolutely. It's impossible to see their best, for one, because Steph wasn't there for part of the series, and they haven't been challenged. This last series, Utah was out two-thirds of
New Orleans.
New Orleans, and without two-thirds of. Oh, excuse me.
You're fine.
Golden State, they haven't been challenged because of the lack of professional. The Spurs. The Spurs don't have their team.
Right. Well, both the guys. The point. I know exactly where you're going. I got you. Both these guys are teams were without one of their two best players.
Yes.
Kawhi Leonard's out in round one.
Couldn't get the numbers together.
I got you.
Absolutely.
Two out of three. I got you.
Yeah.
DeMarcus Cousins out in round two. And these were series where the Warriors were overwhelming favorites going into each of them. And so what we saw them, in my opinion, at their best in moments. The couple times these games are close at halftime, except for game three, what did we see? The Warriors come out in the third quarter
blitz
and beat the brakes off you. They started the third quarter last night 25-4. Like they have now played 92 games this year. Mm-hmm. They have given full effort for 48 minutes, 0 times.
But because they have the ability to literally turn it on when they want to turn it on, when they feel like they need
really
to.
do. So I just don't believe you can be at your best until you're challenged. That's either by a coach, either by the talent that they have. And we know the Spurs, shorthanded. We know the Pelicans, the lack of depth, the lack of shooters that they have, lack of bodies that they can throw at Kevin Durant. So, no, I'm not disappointed in what they've done. I think they've done well getting Steph back in. I like the fact that he did more, and we saw his best in last night's game. But Harden and Chris Paul and what they provide for Houston will bring out the best in Golden State. I believe we will see their best basketball.
One guy has been at his best this postseason, Draymond. Draymond has been, when Steph was gone, Draymond, not Kevin Durant, Draymond said, I am going to claim the mantle of emotional leader of this team, defensive leader of this team, heartbeat of this team. You saw Draymond Green, whether it was texting Kevin Durant at 4 a.m. before Game 4, saying, we need a huge game from you, and KD responding with 38 points. Whether it was Draymond Green taking on the challenge of, yeah, you want to start the Hamptons 5? I'll guard one of the 6 best players in the world, Anthony Davis, and do my best. Whether it was Draymond Green being peacemaker, when KD last night got upset because he thought someone stepped under his feet, and Draymond grabbing KD before he could do something foolish. Draymond this postseason now is giving you 13, 12, and 9. He's almost averaging a triple-double for the postseason. He just did average a triple-double for the series, the first Warrior to ever do it. Draymond's been extraordinary. The rest of the Warriors have been good when they've needed to be.
Extraordinary, yes, but also the one word that this Warriors team, I think, needs to focus on, consistent. He's actually, of the 4, he's been the most consistent throughout the postseason. Not too high, not too low, on both sides of the ball. And I think if we're going to look at one player of the 4 to be the guy that was going to hold everybody together, it certainly wasn't going to be Draymond Green.
No, but that's what makes him really special, Jenna. And you're right about that. When you talk about consistency based on Draymond's emotion and everything, you're not going to look at KD, Steph, and Clay and be like, wow, the most consistent guy is going to be Draymond.
But let's talk about the Pelicans just for a second, because we saw what happened in Game 5. And the narrative with regards to Boogie Cousins has changed a lot over the course of the season. First it was, oh, they'll never win without Boogie. Then it was, hey, they don't need Boogie. Anthony Davis is doing enough on his own to carry this team. Then you saw what happened in this game. I wonder if that has changed at all, and now we're thinking maybe this team does need Boogie Cousins.
I think it has changed when you look at the firepower that they have in the Western Conference, and I believe a lot of it will be based on their superstar. And you saw him demand Boogie Cousins. After the game, people talked to Anthony, what do you think about Boogie Cousins? Man, we need Boogie Cousins. So to me, sign Boogie Cousins to a short-term deal. Sign him to a 2-year deal. The reason why, your superstar wants him there, but then the pressure goes on to the coach, Alvin Gentry. I need you to continue playing at the pace that you played at after Boogie. Now, see if we can get the same type of results from the Twin Towers, but Gentry's got the responsibility. They have to keep playing at that pace, because that pace which made them formidable in the Western Conference.
And you, at the very least, have to be able to toggle the pace up and down. If you can't play at quite that pace when Boogie's on the court, you have to have your team conditioned so when Boogie is off the court for 12 or 14 minutes a game, you can go right back to the pace. That's tough. That's a tough coaching job, but I think Gentry is up for it. I do not think you can let one of the 12 best players in the league walk away and get nothing in return. I just don't. I think you have to re-sign Boogie. Now, If it doesn't work, if you don't look as good, then he becomes a trade chip unless he is just doesn't recover from his injury whatsoever. You have to bring him back to see if it can work, and if not, so you can get something in return. I feel like they've got to re-sign him.
All right, the table is set for the Western Conference Finals. It is the Warriors. It is the Rockets. It is as predicted. Coming up, though, we'll talk some football. Will the Giants' offense be as good on the field as they are on paper? That's next on First Things First. On to football. In my head, we are. Let's chat about number 3 overall pick, Sam Darnold. Jets CEO Christopher Johnson had high praise for the rookie quarterback. He said he, quote, honestly thinks they're going to look back 20 years from now and say this is the moment the Jets shifted into a new gear. Cece, what are reasonable expectations for Sam Darnold in his rookie year?
Well, we want him to be the starter. And it becomes very important that that starter feels the support of the organization, not only from the beginning, but he's going to go through tough stretches. He's going to have bad games. He might have a bad month. But knowing that the organization thinks you're a special player, and now I need to get some help. Like, this is a team game. I need some help. I need Sam Darnold not getting hit. I need Sam Darnold developed a lot like Mark Sanchez early. I need the defense try to be dominant. I need an offense that is predicated around the running game. I need a couple weapons that he can be able to throw to. That's how you're able to set up a quarterback. Don't just keep having press conferences, oh, I love this guy, oh, I think this guy is going to be special. No guy is special when he gets hit. And quarterbacks we've seen, if you want to talk about stunning the growth of a young quarterback, you let him get sacked 60 times
David Carr.
his rookie year. Like, that is not what they are built for. They're not used to it. And if the Jets, if they want to support him, that's what they need to do for Sam Darnold.
And it'd be help if their number 1 receiving option gets his warrant situation cleaned up as well. Here's the deal. I think year 1, what's fair expectations? Start at least half the games and stay healthy. That's because we are learning you cannot correlate how good a guy is in year 1 or how bad a guy is in year 1 with how he's going to be. You can correlate if he's not good enough to get on the field. I remember when the Jets spent a second-round pick on Christian Hackenberg. People love the pro potential of him coming out of Penn State. He's never gotten on the field. But I watched Jared Goff have one of, statistically speaking, the worst rookie years ever.
Yes.
And then what did the Rams do in year 2? They spent some money on a left tackle. They spent some money on some weapons. They trade for Sammy Watkins. They do a lot of things, and all of a sudden
got some fresh thoughts in his head with Sean McVay taking over as the head coach.
Absolutely. They do all these things, and he ascends like that. I've also seen a quarterback, not to pick on Dak, but in Dak in year 1 looked like a super-duper star. In year 2, regressed significantly. So what do I need to see from Sam Darnold? That he's good enough at some point to beat out Josh McCown. Like, that level, and what do I need from his teammates? The health thing is, you talk about the violence of pro football more than anyone I've ever met, probably because you're the person I'm closest to that dealt with the violence of pro football.
Yeah, I'm still flinching.
Right. The difference between what he was subjected to at USC or in high school and what he's about to be subjected to, the Jets need to give him every chance to ease into that. And I know there's no easing into the NFL, but that's the biggest key to his success, more so than his weapons offense.
Jenna, you pointed out one of the keys when we had Sam Darnold in here, because we had the pleasure of being able to meet his family. His dad, behind the scenes, a very, very good football dad. He got emotional. We gave him the Hall of Fame tie. You know, he was crying and everything. But his mom, and his mom coming out here and you being in New York, realizing he comes from a very, very stable home life. That's going to help him in New York City. I don't believe it's going to be too big. He was the next heir apparent star on USC's campus. And if you can be a star on that campus, I believe the transition to New York and the Jets and him having that stable family around him will help him out.
2 things, strong mom and an offensive line. Nothing can go wrong, right? The other team in New York, the Giants, fact, they weren't very good last year.
Isn't your dad like the general manager, head coach, and everything? He runs everything, right?
All of it,
okay.
Cece, all of it. Let's just summarize that one sentence I just gave you 8 seconds ago. The Giants had only 3 wins, 4 games played by OBJ, and countless jokes about Ben McAdoo. But with a new coach, a healthy Beckham, and the number 2 overall pick in Saquon Barkley, Eli Manning says the Giants' offense looks good on paper. Cece, do the Giants have enough on offense to have a bounce-back season?
They really do. They really do. And it starts with their quarterback being able to get his confidence back. Because it's not, as long as Eli's been playing, it's not easy to get through what he went through last year. Let's not forget, there's only bad football, all those losses, but his starting streak he got benched. I mean, the backup looked awful. The head coach lost his job. The general manager lost his job. Now we got all new people for Eli. Like, man, this is a make or break year for Eli Manning, a guy who's won 2 Super Bowls. So, yes, it starts on paper. Does Eli have confidence in what they're doing? They spent their resources to give him some protection. So I believe this is a very important offseason for the New York Football Giants. And, yes, I do believe they can get back 9 wins, 10 wins, and get themselves back into the playoff picture.
I feel like if any player should be happiest, it's not Odell coming back. It's not the general manager looking at this team. It's got to be Eli Manning. He's got someone to throw to. He's got someone to hand the ball to. He's got Nate Soldier to protect him.
And what else happened on draft day, Nick, or didn't happen to help Eli?
They didn't quarterback.
Yes.
There is no team, I want to be very clear about this. There is no team in the league that did more this offseason to help their quarterback than the Giants did for Eli Manning.
Yeah.
They signed the best left tackle on the market. They used the number 2 overall pick not to draft a quarterback.
Excuse me. Also, left tackle, they paid above market value.
Right.
For Nate.
They overpaid. They said, we have to get him a left tackle. So they signed the best left tackle and pay a premium for it. Number 2 overall pick. They got a lot of options. Draft a quarterback. Draft a defensive lineman, like the way they've won Super Bowls before. Trade back. Get future picks and less super blue chip prospects. The 12th pick and the 21st pick, whatever it is. No. We're going to give you the best running back, the best highest rated running back to come out of college in arguably a decade. I think he's rated higher than Zeke was. Doesn't mean he'll be that player, but as far as what they see of him as a pro. And while they didn't give him this, oh, yeah, by the way, one of the 3 best receivers in the league. He's coming back as well. No one had more. Oh, and by the way, we're going to hire an offensive-minded head coach, a guy that built things in Minnesota offensively.
Who believes in you.
Who believes in you. They have done everything you can ask to do for a quarterback. So the question is now Eli. And I go back to the same list I had yesterday when we talk about the quarterbacks in the NFC. Hey, man, oh, man, oh, man. There are 7 quarterbacks that are outstanding. Rodgers, Breeze, Wilson, Wentz, Ryan, Cam, Kirk. There's another half dozen. I didn't even mention Matt Stafford, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jameis Winston, Jared Goff. Like, where does Eli fall in the pecking order? Because the Giants have enough skill position guys, and I would argue high-level talent on defense if they play to their talent.
Yes.
That with average quarterback play, which is what they had 2 years ago when they went to the playoffs, they're fine. But it's very hard to survive in this league with well below average quarterback play. So that's the question for Eli. Who is he with now the pieces in place, theoretically a healthy team, and an improvement at head coach?
And he definitely has the best running back situation that he's had since he's been a Giant, as far as a guy that can do all things for 3 downs. And I believe that has to be able to help Eli's confidence. When you look at the quarterbacks in the NFC, it becomes important, man. They need to get Eli off to a good start. Like, people don't study the NFC. You need to start looking at those quarterbacks. So you start looking at matchups. Who can win divisions? Who can advance to the conference championship? Who can represent the NFC in the Super Bowl? Man, that quarterback can't be a detriment to the team. And that's what we have seen with Eli Manning.
Isn't it funny how far we came from where we were midway through last season? Eli's terrible. Eli's getting benched. Maybe he's lost it. He's got nothing left. The team benched him. I mean, I didn't get the blessing from the owner, but the general manager and the coaches. And now we're starting this season with, we're going to anoint Eli, give him all the tools he could put him at, and now go out and play football, Eli.
Eli earned that level of deference with the 2 championships. And now we are going to see if he can pay it forward to a degree.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things the Giants could have done that would have been not unfair to Eli, but would have been, for lack of a better term, like mean to Eli. Like, oh, listen, we're going to hire a defensive-minded head coach, or we're going to draft your replacement, or even draft Bradley Chubb. Or they did everything in their power to help him. We'll see if he is...
They could have traded Odell Beckham.
There's another one. I didn't even think about that. They could have used the 34th overall pick, second pick of the second round. They used it on a guard. So you get one of the best guards available, you get the best veteran left tackle available.
They could have said, Eric Flowers is just fine. Don't even worry about it. Okay, that would never have happened.
But they could have. I mean, there's a lot of things they could have done. Eli couldn't have scripted an offseason better for him, and then we'll see if he can take advantage of it.
And I hope the Giants, I hope they reach out to Eric Flowers. I'm glad you mentioned his name, because with Nate Solder playing left tackle, you get one of the best guards in the draft, Hernandez, I think from Texas.
Will Hernandez.
Will Hernandez, and you get him. If we can move him back to right tackle, and don't put the pressure on him.
Yeah.
He's in the 5th year of that first contract. I believe you're better off with him on the roster. I know he's not participating in the offseason workouts, but if the Giants at their best means their draft pick has the mindset, I'm going to come in and play this last year with Nate kind of mentoring him and taking over the responsibility at left tackle.
Here's a question for you guys. So now that the offense is set for the most part where it is, where does Pat Shurmur fit into all this now? How he works with these weapons, how he uses them, and how much is Eli looking forward to this? As I'm sure.
Let's look at Pat, what he did with your boy. He resurrected Case Keenum. He's the one who did it. Their wide receivers, the scheme that he put them in week after week, they were able to take advantage of their talent. Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, we saw them develop. Darwin Cook, the rookie from Florida State. Immediately, they had a running game, which they hadn't had since Adrian had moved on. So look for them to do the same thing with the weapons the Giants have and the running back that they have in Barkley.
And I'm going to add one other name that I think could benefit the most from Pat Shurmur. Evan Ingram, friend of ours, a guy that I think they have a big bet on via draft capital, and a guy who, when you see what Kyle Rudolph was able to do in Minnesota, I think Evan Ingram's a better athlete than him. I think Evan Ingram, and Kyle Rudolph's an excellent player. I think Evan Ingram, if he reaches full potential, can be that level player or better. How do you use Evan Ingram as a stretch-the-field tight end? That's another part of it, another good weapon for Eli.
All right, we're going to take a little break. Coming up on the other side, the New Orleans Saints are going to be missing one of their stars for a couple games next year, and it's not from injury. We'll tell you why next on First Things First. Time for some stories to start your morning. There's Tiger Woods. He tees off at 1:52 today. The TPC, the Players' Championship. What a group he's in. He's playing alongside Phil Mickelson and Ricky Fowler. Chris, let's dive into your wheelhouse. What do you expect from Tiger in golf's fifth major?
Not what I expect from Tiger. Tiger better shoot 4 or 5 under par, because with the depth that we have on tour now, you can't get too far behind these players. Tiger, you can't shoot 1 under, 2 under, even par of the first round. Somebody going to go out there and shoot a 66. Somebody might shoot a 65. Like Tiger, the weather in Jacksonville, where TPC, where it's played, great. It's going to be 80-something degrees. It means a lot of birdies. Ball going to be flying, distance. So his driving has been good. Let's get back to old Tiger making some putts. If he makes putts, he can be in contention. I still think he's about a month, 6 weeks away from winning, getting back in the winner's circle.
He was awful with the putter in the last tournament. He needs to be better here. I just hope he scores better than Phil Mickelson. That's what I'm rooting for before we get to the weekend. I hope he beats Phil Mickelson. I think it'll be fun to watch them play together.
Okay, on to the NFL. Kurt Warner is already in the Hall of Fame, but apparently he thought about making a comeback for the upcoming season. Warner said he was in discussions with an NFL coach. The team went out and signed somebody else. CC, could the 46-year-old Warner actually have still played some football?
Nope. Absolutely not.
Why not?
There's a thing called contact, and there's a thing called avoiding contact, all right? It's hard enough when you're young to avoid contact, let alone when you get old. And you get older, your body is not meant to be hit by a young NFL player. And that right there would send Kurt Warner. And let me tell you something. What the Hall of Fame should do, if Kurt Warner goes back on the field, we're going to hold his Hall of Fame jacket.
Rescind it?
No, we're just going to hold it until because he's not going to look like a Hall of Famer when he's on the field.
Man, and I watched Kurt Warner. People think of him as a Ram and then as a Cardinal. What we're not showing in this compilation are the highlights with the Giants
yes.
when that contact came and got him. Yeah. He's not a guy that would deal with that contact that well at 36, much less 46.
According to reports, wide receiver Brandon Marshall is meeting with the Seahawks today. Marshall was released by the Giants last month after an injury-plagued season. CC, can a 34-year-old Brandon Marshall still make an impact in the NFL?
Yes, he can. Brandon's one of the best conditioned athletes that you'll ever see. He loves training, loves working out, is really committed to taking care of his body. He didn't like, and talking to him this offseason, he didn't like the way things ended with the Giants. He really thought coming there as a number 2 opposite of OBJ, but got injured early. OBJ got injured. They had an awful season. Yes, I believe he can make a contribution at 34. What I'm surprised at with Seattle is that
they bring him in and not Dez?
Yeah, not even give him a look, not even an interview. That's very surprising.
And it also shows the rehabilitation Brandon Marshall's done of his image and of his mental health.
Yeah.
As opposed to, if you consider our locker room, with they're trying to tear down and rebuild in Seattle, we can handle Brandon Marshall. He might actually be an asset to the locker room, and we don't even want to look at 5-year younger Dez Bryant.
Crazy.
That's an indictment on him as well.
All right, finally, the
Great
Paul
point.
George sweepstakes is just getting underway. One potential landing spot could be the team who traded him away last season, the Indiana Pacers. Wouldn't that be something? But their GM couched it, saying that it would, quote, depend on the fit. Nick, where do you think PG-13 will eventually land?
But before I answer that, can I just talk? Because I don't think he's going to go to the Pacers, but I do want to say this. I think it'd be a great fit. I think that'd be remarkable for them. If they are able to basically loan him out to Oklahoma City for a year, get Victor Oladipo back, have Oladipo turn into that type of player. Our friend Chris Mannix has told you Paul George is a small city guy. He likes fishing. He likes more of a quiet life than you maybe would assume. So Indiana and Oklahoma City have fit his personality. So I think it'd be great for the Pacers if they could get him back. But I think he's going to Los Angeles. I think along with him will be one of the 6 best players in the league, maybe one of the 1 best players in the league in LeBron James. But I think that's where he's going. I think that's what Magic's been building towards. I think sometimes when there's smoke, there's not fire. But sometimes when there's been billowing smoke for months and months and months, it's because there's a fire. There's been a lot of smoke surrounding Paul George and the Lakers for quite some time.
And also there's been a lot of questions coming out of Indianapolis. Would they want Paul George back? When you even hear the general manager in his quotes, he talked about that as our culture's a little bit different. We don't want superstar players. We want people who just want to work hard. To me, it seemed like an indictment on Paul George because he is a superstar. To me, Jenna, it's like that old girlfriend and everything. Ain't no need to go back. Like, it ain't better. You remember it for what it was. Like, just keep it moving. Like, don't go back to old girlfriend. It's like, then she comes up with, I didn't want you anyway. Oh, something. I feel the same way. Paul George should move on.
For like 5 seconds, I thought you were talking about my life. And then I was like, oh, wait, we're talking about Paul George.
There are some analogous situations.
I was trying to give you something in your wheelhouse. But what you do with it, Jenna, I don't know. I put it by the rim. You can either tap it in or you can dunk it.
I came at you with some sauce and I put it down.
What do you like more for Paul George, L.A. or Philly? L.A. assuming they get another guy. Not just him, L.A. or Philly.
I just think the pool of going back home, back to your home state of California, is stronger on players than people realize. Now, I think the better basketball situation is in Philadelphia. I mean, you imagine Paul George being on that team last night? I don't care who Boston have. They can bring back Gordon Hayward. They can bring back Cedric Maxwell. Oh, I mean, they can bring back a bunch of people. Like, it wouldn't matter with Paul George because he gives them the perimeter defender at an elite level, gives them another knockdown shooter, and another ball handler.
Well, I think that leads us to this.
Absolutely. Here we go. Sixers season came to an end last night after losing to the Celtics in Game 5. A lot of questions surrounding the process. Did it work? Are Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons enough to carry this team further next year? Does it need more processing? Here's Embiid with some thoughts on the matter.
The process, I've said this before, the process is never going to end. Takes a process to get to the playoffs. We did it. It's another one to get to the, I wouldn't say the semifinals, but the conference finals. We didn't do it, so next year, that's definitely our goal.
All right, obviously a lot to be addressed this offseason.
Embiid's being a little disingenuous there. He says, our goal was not to get to the conference semifinals. His goal was to get to the conference finals. That's not what they were talking about. That's not what they were acting like. They starting with the way they ended this season after they got that 30-point lead on Cleveland, their goal was the NBA Finals. And they were being discussed as they were the Vegas favorite at one point this postseason to make the NBA Finals. So he's now resetting where their actual goal was by the end of the season. But I just want to add that, but go ahead, Jenna.
When we talked about this earlier in the show, CC, you mentioned we talked about what do the 76ers need? And while they need Ben Simmons to shoot from outside of 5 feet, and they need Joel Embiid to have a little bit more of an aggressive role, and then you casually mentioned, and maybe they can get a veteran in. But I think that's in real discussions here, because every time one of these, a Paul George or even a LeBron James name comes up, Philadelphia is, we talk about the Sixers as a possible landing spot. Do they need a superstar to actually compete for a championship with the team they have constructed now?
I don't know if they necessarily need a superstar, but they need a couple different players, all right? It's hard when you have a lineup that has Bellinelli, J.J. Redick, and T.J. McConnell in the lineup. The reason why, because Brad Stevens, what he did was he posted up all 3 of these players. All 3 of these players undersized. All of them are good shooters, but they're undersized, and none of them are athletic enough to be able to compete with the most athletic teams in the NBA. So you might talk about it being a superstar player. They need a wing player that has some size and can shoot. It would help this team out better, but more importantly, what they need is they need Markelle Fultz to take over the point guard spot for them. I believe that will give them the type of balance because he is a great athlete who can push the ball. He's 6'4". You can't post him up. He's not a detriment on the defensive end. So, yes, getting another player, I'm not going to hang on just it got to be a superstar, but it can't be players that are one-dimensional like Belinelli and J.J. Redick are right now.
I am going to hang on it being a superstar for this reason. This is the only summer they can do it. People need to understand this. Because Joel Embiid's contract extension is kicking in, and because they are going to give Ben Simmons the max, and because they drafted Markelle Fultz at number 1 overall and the salary that goes along with that, and because of the contract they gave Robert Covington, the only way they can sign a free agent, not trade for one, or sign a superstar, not trade for one, not give up one of these big pieces, is this summer. If they do not sign a star player this summer, they will not be able to over the next 5 years. Doesn't matter what the cap grows to, this is their window of opportunity right now. And so that's why you hear LeBron attached to them. That's why you hear Paul George attached to them. That's why, even though they'd have to trade for him, you hear Kawhi Leonard attached to them. Because they couldn't wait out Kawhi's contract. They couldn't say, oh, Kawhi, we hear he really wants to come here. We'll wait a year till he's a free agent. They wouldn't. In a year from now, they can't do it. And if you believe in Boston, the way I know you do, Jenna, the way I believe you do, Chris, about that they'll be better with Kyrie, they'll be better with Gordon Hayward, obviously they'll be better as Tatum and Brown get a year older, they need to do more. So to compete for a championship, that's not even talking about those monsters out west.
Right.
And so, yes, absolutely, 100%, they need to add someone.
So I understand everything you're saying. I understand where that window is. But do we even have this conversation, CC, had this team made it to the Eastern Conference Finals? Do we look at this team and say, you know what they need is another piece? They need one superstar and they're a complete team.
Yeah, if you're being honest, if their overall lack of athleticism, the lack of shooters at certain positions, and to me, I don't believe Ben Simmons is a point guard. He doesn't have the judgment to be a point guard. He definitely can't shoot good enough to be a point guard. Nick talks about where he has a passing advantage. Yeah, he has a slight passing advantage, but he doesn't take care of the basketball. He doesn't have the mindset, how to run a team, how to set people up. He's very, very limited at playing the point guard. He didn't play point guard at LSU. So now trying to force that on him, I believe he's playing out of position.
Well, here's the thing, though, because you and I are diametrically opposed on this specific point. I think Ben Simmons has to be your point guard, and I think he can be a transcendent point guard. But if shooting's...
Where's Fultz going to play?
I think you can play them both in the backcourt at the same time. Fultz can be your scoring two, and then on the defensive end, Fultz can guard the opposing point guard, and Simmons can guard a wing. But if shooting's your concern, unless you're going to play him at center, what position
I'm not playing him at a position. I'm playing him because he's an athlete. It's not about he's a 2, he's a 3, he's a 4. That part is not important.
But with your dire concern about his shooting, which is legitimate, the position outside of center, whether it's 2, 3, 4, whether you're saying positionless, that you can get away with being a deficit as a shooter more than any of the others. You can't be a deficit as a shooter as a wing.
I just think you're getting too caught up with the point guard position, all right? He's a good athlete we're going to have on the floor. He's going to handle the ball some, but he is not a traditional point guard. He does not have the skill set. He can't run an offense, and it's important, Nick, he can't shoot.
I understand, but the important him not being able to shoot is no matter the position he's playing, that matters. I would argue it matters more in the positions you're talking about. But I disagree with you on if he can run an offense. But to Jenna's question, would we be talking about this had they won this round? Listen, Philly is the process is about trying to win a championship. And this team is presently constituted, unless the Warriors break up, unless Chris Paul gets old quick, are not ready to compete with the Warriors and the Rockets. Now, if they're saying we're going to take the super long view, we're going to wait those guys out, we're worried about 2021 and 2022, that's fine. But they could go be the league favorites to win the title if they sign LeBron. They could be one of the top favorites if they get Kawhi or Paul George. This is the summer to do it. I absolutely would go all in on that, 100%.
You know what? Normally on this show, we sort of frown upon people just walking onto the set in the middle of a song. Unless you're C.J. McCollum.
Unless you're a real damn guard. If you're a real guard in the NBA, step forward. Oh, we got one. Oh, can you shoot outside 3 feet? Oh, we got one. Can you run an offense? Oh, we got one. And he just happened to be from OHIO.
We are back after this.
What's up, baby?
Back here. First things first, we welcome in Blazers star C.J. McCollum. Hey, C.J., thanks for coming back.
Good to see you guys.
Last time you were here, we didn't have a true vision of how the conference finals were going to go on both sides, and now we do. So we were like, we need somebody to come in and break it down, and all eyes and signs pointed to you. No pressure. Just try to get it all right. Okay?
Jenna is under this thing where all athletes are under this extreme pressure. Pressure is one of her things.
You're not under pressure when you go out there on the court sometimes?
There's always pressure, but some players don't feel it. Some players rise to the occasion, and others crumble.
That's how I feel about this show, CJ. It's the same thing. Like, these guys are always stressed out, and I just rise above it.
Oh, Jenna cool as a cucumber.
I just calm them down.
Nothing neurotic about her.
Not a big surprise that the Celtics and Cavs are squaring off in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's not even a huge surprise that Tatum, Brown, and Rozier have been playing lights out this postseason. It is sort of a surprise that the Celtics are where they are without Kyrie Irving and without Gordon Hayward and without Larry Bird. Eastern Conference Finals Game 1 is Sunday. CJ, I'll start with you. What do you think the Celtics have to do to upset the Cavaliers now moving forward?
Well, obviously, everything starts with LeBron James, so trying to figure out a way to slow him down because you can't stop him. He's going to get his, he's going to distribute, he's going to rebound and kind of control the tempo of the game. But I think the difference with the Cavs is the second guy and the third guy. Kevin Love was great down the stretch of that last series. They kind of force-fed him to allow him to get into a rhythm, and then he was knocking down threes. He was finishing around the basket. But the production from J.R. Smith. J.R. Smith is knocking down threes. Obviously, he played great. He got to go off the last few days, so he should be relaxed and laid back, heading into this next series. If they have 3 guys that contribute or 5 guys in double figures, as they did in the last game, I feel like they'll be very, very hard to beat until they get to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I think it's pretty important, the Celtics, Brad Stevens, what type of plan he comes up with LeBron. Because if you look at their starting lineup right now, they got Baines starting at the 5, Al Horford starting at the 4, and then they got these young kids at the 3 and the 2, Tatum and Brown. They don't have anyone in their lineup that can slow LeBron down. No. So do they go to a smaller lineup? Do they put Baines on the bench, Horford at the 5, bring in someone else to build through? Because right now, these guys are playing 30 to 36 minutes. They don't have an answer for LeBron. So what I look for, Brad, is not what they do initially. That's one of the things. But what are they going to counterpunch? We saw Joel Embiid begin to dominate. What they start do, they start take the ball out of his hands. They start double teaming him, which they don't typically do with the Celtics. So for me, what do they do initially? Watch that. But then what's their counterpunch to LeBron being effective offensively? Because I believe LeBron, he's going to go off in this series. He's going to average about 38 points at least in this series.
And he has owned personally the Celtics over the last few years. He's 10-1 personally against them in the playoffs. He's won his last 6 games in Boston. But the other thing that happened last night that mattered is the Eastern Conference Finals schedule came out. And it's a bummer for Boston because a whole lot of rest early in this series. They play Sunday, so that'll be a week since the Cavs played last. Then they play Tuesday, only 1 day off. And then between games 2 and 3 is 3 full days of rest. They play Tuesday and then not again till Saturday.
They're giving them 1 travel day.
Right. No, they're giving them 3 days off. Not 2 days off. They're giving them, they are off Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday because they want the series to be extended. So instead of 2 days off, they have 3 full days off in between games 2 and 3, right? Like that's
big.
Why is that bad?
No, well, it's great for LeBron. It's great. You can play LeBron
it's
45
based on the TV
minutes.
schedule. They want to start the finals at a certain date.
Exactly right. They want to start the NBA finals on a certain date, and they want to have as many. There are certain days of the week that are better for ratings.
But you meant it's bad for Boston.
It's bad for Boston because LeBron's going to be playing 3 games in 12 days. Like he's
that never happens.
Say it again?
That never happens in the regular season, ever.
Right, and he played all 82 this year. And then they played back-to-back days or every other day in the second round, and they went 7 games in the first round. LeBron's going to be fresh for the first time since the All-Star break. Like, this is what this means for him in particular. Celtics are all young, like, except for Horford. They can play. They want to play as much as possible. Like, they're feeling great about how they are right now. Yeah, the time off will be good for them. But that is such an advantage for the oldest team in the league, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and for LeBron James, who's carried the heaviest workload of any player in the league this year.
Look, the question is always going to be, moving forward, every game, as long as you're facing LeBron James, am I right? How do you stop him? How do you slow him down? What's the game plan you put into place if you're Boston? I mean, you understand what it's like to be on the court against him. What does it take? What do you have to do?
I mean, he's averaging 34, 9, and 9 up to this point, so I don't think you can stop him, but you can force him into uncomfortable positions. I think you send a double team randomly at times on the first or second dribble, especially down the stretch of games. You don't let him have a chance to take game winners. You have to take the ball out of his hands and make somebody else do it. You've seen Jordan, he had to pass at times, in the prime of his career because of guys just being wide open and being able to shoot. So that's one of the things you have to do, and Kobe talked about it. He likes to go left, especially down the stretch of games. He hit a lot of game winners going left. The three-pointer was left. The quick lay against Indiana Pacers was left. But he can go right. He can counter with the spin move. So you have to be cognizant of all those things, understanding that he's going to get his.
I think it's more important you shut down the other players because we know LeBron, he's been so consistent, as consistent as any player we've ever seen in the playoffs or in pressure games, but the other players and how the rest of the team function. If Kevin Love gets 20 points, if JR gets 15, if Kyle Korver gets 15 to 20, so they got to overplay the three-point line. A lot like they did Philadelphia when they started out. The only difference was Joel Embiid, they played him single. LeBron is going to get 35 to 40 if you single cover him compared to the way Philadelphia with their younger shooters. They couldn't make enough shots early, and Joel Embiid couldn't punish them enough. One of the hidden things, I believe, is watch foul trouble. Watch LeBron getting the younger players and watch LeBron getting the whistle going against younger players.
Well, to your point about it's about the other guys, round one, that they easily could have lost to Indiana. They win in 7. They are outscored by 40 points in that series. LeBron averaged 35, 10, and 8. Round 2, where they sweep Toronto, LeBron averaged 35, 8, and 11. So his production, like tomato, A plus one series, A plus the other.
Yes.
The difference was the supporting players. They had nobody get to 20 points in round 1.
Yep.
They had guys
Kevin Love, the only one averaging double figures for the Cavs, averaging 11 points a game.
In round 1, and then in round 2?
LeBron's got 5 other guys averaging double figures in the second series against Toronto.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you guys hit it right on the head, but the difference between, the teams they played up to this point is that Boston can defend with all 5 positions. You've seen the impact Marcus Smart made, being able to guard the 4, being able to guard point guards. He took a charge down the stretch and he didn't call it. He got some clutch stops down the stretch, and I think they're going to move him around.
That big stop against Sarge.
Right. So they had wings guarding 4s. Look for them to try to mix and match in the upcoming series because of Jaylen Brown being out there, because of Tatum. They might put some of those guys on Kevin Love at times.
And I think that the Boston does have, much like Indiana, bodies to throw at LeBron. Now, again, I just laid out the stats. He had the same stats against Indiana and Toronto. But if you watched the game, man, it looked like it was easy against Toronto. It really looked like LeBron was working for everything against Indiana. I thought it was smart that they were, when he was bringing the ball up court, they were picking him up 80 feet just to make him use energy. Right. That's something I want to ask your opinion on because I think it's underrated for the audience. When a team's picking you up full court, it's not because they think they're going to turn you over like in high school. It's because they're just trying to make you exert energy as much as possible, wear you out, and how tiring that is.
Yeah, a lot of teams try to turn you a couple times, and we even implement that in certain series against certain players. Obviously, James Harden being one who handles the ball a lot. You want them to have to work for everything. So you don't want them to just be able to comfortably dribble it up, orchestrate the offense and set up the pick and rolls. You want them to have to work to get across half court. You want them to have to work to get into pick and rolls, and it wears you down.
Yeah, they want you to work, but also they want you to work against the shot clock. All right? You got 16 to get the ball to midcourt. And then after that, they like you to be around 12 seconds to be able to run your offense. So you don't have to play great defense for the whole 24 seconds in the shot clock, which is exhausting, for NBA players.
All right, CJ, don't go anywhere. That was the East. How about the West? Can the Rockets dethrone the Warriors? We'll break that down next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First with CJ McCollum. So the conference finals are set. We previewed the East. If you want to know how the West was won, hitch your wagon to either the bright star of the Warriors or the equally bright star of the Rockets. Both teams with stellar resumes coming into the finals. League-leading Rockets, winners of 65 games, facing the defending champion Warriors. Nick, I'll start with you. What do you think? Rockets have a chance to knock off the Golden State Warriors?
Of course they have a chance, but I also think they're better. I mean, maybe we'll look back on this and I'll say, what was I thinking? You got 2 MVPs, you got 4 Hall of Famers, you got a team that was in third gear, if not second gear, most of the season. But I can't get over this one number, 50-5. 50-5. That is what the Rockets were this year with Harden, CP3, and Capella.
Wow.
That's an amazing number. When their big three played,
so. I didn't look nice.
Right, like that. I mean, that means something. It's not a small sample size. Yeah. That is not. There's no. It was against weak competition.
No, and you've been talking about that number for over 2 months.
Because for real, because it was 39-3. It was it was jarring to me because when the Rockets, they only lost 17 times. But for 12 of those losses, or actually, 14 of those losses, because the 50-5 includes the playoffs, to have come when one of those guys wasn't in the lineup, you just saw how dominant they were with their core. And the Rockets have something that the only team the Warriors have faced at this round of the playoffs ever had going for them, and that was the team that damn near beat them, Oklahoma City. They're fully healthy. The Warriors are used to, in the playoffs, getting what they got this playoffs again. Some injury luck. No Kawhi. No Boogie. They've faced the Rockets in the past when they didn't have their point guard. They faced you guys when you guys didn't have Nurkic, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, they've had a lot of good injury luck. That is not applying.
The Rockets got some of that luck in the semifinals.
Absolutely
with
right.
Utah.
And the Warriors also have never had to deal with in this entire run in any series until this one. So this ain't starting at Oracle. This isn't starting at home. And so for all those reasons, yes, I think the Rockets can beat them. I'll pick the Rockets to beat them in 7.
What do you think, CJ?
Wait. you think they're going to, not only do you think they're going to win, you think they're better.
Yeah, I do. I think that go ahead. Tell me.
No, I definitely think the Rockets can win. Obviously, look at the roster they put together, bringing in P.J. Tucker. I think that's going to be a big help for them because he can potentially match up with Draymond when they go small with that Hampton 5 lineup. And then you also have Mbah a Moute, who's a really good defender. Although KD's going to get his buckets, he's going to score. He can guard him better than a chair. As they say, most of the series he's been shooting over chairs because the guys are too short. So with that being said, I still think the Warriors are probably going to win. I think they have the advantage in experience, having played together. This is a lot of Rockets players' first time in the Western Conference Finals. Obviously, CP will rise to the occasion as he showed last game, carrying the shoulder of the load, 10 assists, no turnovers, 40 points, career high, 20 in the fourth quarter. But I think that for All-Stars, KD is ultimately the difference. If they can slow him down a little bit, they have a chance to win.
I think Houston has a better chance than any other team because more so than I don't agree with you on the Boston series as far as Boston has bodies to throw at LeBron. I think they got people, but I don't like their body types.
I thought they had more bodies than Toronto did, is my point.
More than Toronto.
Yes, go ahead.
But KD, I believe that Houston, Mbah a Moute, I believe their bodies, P.J. Tucker, and their rotation of guys that they can throw at KD presents the biggest problem that KD will have had in this year's playoff and last year's playoff. The Cavs didn't have anything that they can do with them. We know that. So I like Houston's chances. I think also Golden State, we always talk about, man, they're one of the best defensive teams. They're going to have to play the best defense they've ever played in a series because what Houston presents to you with the high pick and roll, if they try to play small, with Capella and Harden in that high pick and roll, I believe that gives them a problem, and they have so many shooters. Typically, they're used to defending 1 or 2 great shooters, but they got 4 or 5 guys that are just knockdown cold shooters, and I believe that gives Golden State more problems than we've seen them have in the playoffs.
I think one of the issues Houston's going to have with the Warriors is the fact that Draymond can guard everybody on the court. So in the last series, you had Rudy at the 5, right? So CP and James are taking turns, running pick and rolls with him, getting the switch, going to work. CP likes to shoot that step back corner 3. But with Draymond, he's sitting down. They're going to switch, and James is going to have to, between cross and get to the cup and make plays. But it's not going to be as easy as it was to get to the lane and to, obviously play one-on-one with Draymond potentially switching.
Yeah, I hope they play Draymond. I hope they play that small lineup because I believe that Houston should stick with Capella because he can guard Draymond. It's not like you got to worry about him.
Right.
Like, Draymond, how many shots is he going to hit? He's not going to blow past him. So I believe it plays in Houston's favor where they can play big, force Golden State to play small. I believe that's a huge advantage for the Houston Rockets.
Skill-wise, it seems like you're all saying this could go 7 games. Then they match up. If both teams are healthy and both teams are playing,
I think CJ's more confident in
the Warriors.
The Warriors can finish it up.
My question to you is that because of that one thing you brought up, which is experience, which is normally not that tangible thing that we like to talk about, but you said, hey, they've got the experience. How much does that really factor in here when you're talking about the conference finals, a team that's won 65 games? Are they really at a disadvantage with that?
I don't necessarily think they're in a disadvantage because these are elite players. James is an elite player, probably going to win MVP this season. CP is an elite player who understands the game and how to manipulate certain situations. But with that being said, the Warriors have play calls for days out of timeouts. They know what to run down the stretch. They know how to get advantages in terms of running a pick and roll with Steph and KD, which is very hard to guard because once you get a smaller guy on KD, it's curtains down the stretch. So with that being said, I just think that with the execution standpoint and the way the Warriors score is completely different than the Rockets. There's movement without the ball. There's cutting, playing off the split post. So it's not just guarding somebody one-on-one, which you can do in this league. It's understanding that there's going to be movement, and Steph and them can play one-on-one, shoot threes off the dribble. And that changes the entire dynamic because they have to work on both sides of the ball.
Question for you. Does Houston and what they're going to have to do and the different looks, and no one plays basketball like Golden State offensively, do you think that affects Houston and their ability to play what we've seen? Nick, you said their offense is the most efficient that we've seen?
Well, yeah, they were. At the tail end of the year, it tailed off. But at one point, they had the highest scoring offense per 100 possessions in the history of the NBA. Ended up being about 5th. But this Golden State team ended up being about 9th.
Right. Do you think them playing defense affects that?
I think they can play defense. The only thing you fear with this series, obviously stretching out, there's a lot of days to rest in between, is the fact that, James and CP are going to have to score 25 to 30, each night.
Yes.
Or get contributions from Trev, from, as you said before, Clint Capella, who reportedly the Phoenix Suns offered a max, so cha-ching. But I think it's going to be interesting to see, can they still score 25 to 30 while chasing those guys around? Or does the Houston Rockets use mix and match? So you allow James to kind of rest on defense.
Well, that's where, by the way, I mentioned Klay Thompson potentially being the X factor in this series. Right. I think Steph's going to get his. I think KD's going to get his. I would, if they are going to play that Hamptons 5,
right,
I would ask Harden to guard Iggy as much as possible so he can rest somewhat on defense. I think Harden's strong enough to deal with Iggy. He's got a slight height disadvantage, but they don't want Iggy.
And Iggy's not posting up a
lot.
Right,
Iggy's not there. But there is a template, however, that we've seen, and I think that some of the tape the Cavs need to be watching is the 2016 finals, not only because that's the only series this Warriors team's ever lost, but what they did in determining every time Steph is on the court, if we can, we are going to run action to get him defending the ball.
You're talking about Houston, watch Cleveland.
Yes, if I didn't say it right, I apologize. Houston, watch what Cleveland did. Because LeBron, it almost looked like he had a vendetta. Like, it wasn't that. It was the right basketball play. But we are going to get Steph switched onto the ball handler, coming off, by the way, similarly as in 2016, a sprained MCL where he maybe isn't moving laterally as well as he would like, and we are going to make him defend. We are going to exhaust him, and we are going to make, this, you and Steph are about the same size. Do I have that right?
I'm probably a little taller, probably weigh a little bit more.
Oh, right, but he's not drastically, obviously. But he's not drastically. People think Steph's this tiny guy.
No, he's not.
Steph's 6'3", you know what I mean? He's a little bit smaller than you. It's exhausting when you have to go through screens all game, right? Like the physical toll it puts on you. That's something that I think Houston has to do. I think they have to hunt out Steph on defense.
And they've done that all season. They take advantage of matchups. They pick out who they want strategically, and that's why I don't think there's a disadvantage in the experience because CP studies the game. He understands that, for them to be successful in this series, they have to exploit certain matchups, whether that be when JaVale McGee's in the game, putting him in pick and rolls, understanding that James is able to draw fouls, so get the switch. And if you can get Steph, if you can get KD or Klay in foul trouble, then they're out of the game. Yes. You don't have to worry about them.
All right, CJ, keep hanging out with us. Coming up, should we still trust the process? Next on First Things First. So much to talk about with Blazers star CJ McCollum. Thankfully, he's here, so it makes the conversation easier. 76 Celtics. Also, the Sixers and the Celtics. Game 5, Ben Simmons faking out Marcus Smart.
This is just miscommunication, right, CJ? You got it. Switch. Oh, man. What happened?
Yeah, you got a deadly shooter coming off, or a guy who's a threat in J.J. Redick, and you're taught to chase over screens, don't allow him to get easy baskets, and Simmons makes a good read in the half court.
They give him the easiest basket imaginable to Ben Simmons.
All right, same game, same guy. This time Simmons gets the spinning 360 in traffic. He gets it to fall.
Man, he gets himself up in there. The Little League coaches tell you, never jump in there not knowing what you're going to do. Unless you're 6'10", and you got unbelievable athletic ability. Switch his hand, shoots it with his right.
That's tough. He likes to finish with his right hand in the paint, too. So that's a tough finish and a smart play by him.
You think his jump shot can be resurrected, can be fixed?
I think it can, but I think he has to start from scratch.
Well,
I think he might have to switch hands.
That's where he is, so good for him.
He might be shooting with the wrong hand.
Sticking with this game, because it was the only one last night, Marcus Smart to Jason Tatum for the alley-oop. 1, 2, and then
that is a perfect pass by Marcus Smart that I don't know that he could duplicate if you gave him 100 more tries. Going that speed at that angle.
When you watch Marcus Smart, if you're cheering for the other team, you hate him. If he's on your team, you're like, man, good hustle.
How frustrating is it for him to guard you?
I like Smart, so it's fun. I like the challenge of guys who compete, who enjoy the game.
That right there means he can't stop me. I like having him on me.
Your words, not mine.
All right, finally, Jason Tatum getting it done again, this time dropping Robert Covington, hitting the step-back jumper.
Broke his ankles, man.
I like him, and it's ironic that, his pick was traded from the Sixers. I think he took that personal this series.
Is that something NBA players, because I know as fans in the internet, man, we love to see someone get crossed over, drop them to the floor.
You do. You enjoy it. You enjoy breaking somebody off, hearing the crowd, and then you focus in on making the shots just like you in the driveway.
All right, it's safe to say, CJ, that the process turned into the process of elimination last night for the Philadelphia 76ers. Great season, not so great playoff run. The Sixers, after defeating the Heat in 5 games, were sent packing by the Celtics in 5 games. 114-112 was your final last night. Simmons, Embiid, both bright, confident stars coming in, both question marks coming out. Sixers come up short. The process is now in question. C.J. McCollum, what went so wrong for Philadelphia?
I think down the stretch of games, their lack of experience, the lack of execution really cost them. They had some chances to put games away. You look at a couple of games ago, it was tied up, ball out of bounds. You get a turnover, give the Boston Celtics a chance to score down 2.
Yeah. Didn't even get a shot.
Didn't get a shot. And then you also had opportunity offensive rebound, under 24 on the shot clock. You could have pulled the ball out and got fouled, and that's what you talked about. I don't know if he wanted to shoot the free throws or not, what the case may be, but that's a chance where time and score, you realize that you pull it out.
Yeah, not to pile on, those both 2 mistakes by Ben Simmons. He was one inbound in the pass, threw it away. He was the one also with the offensive rebound.
And should have pulled it out, absolutely.
Yeah, but there was other lack of experience plays to where they didn't get loose balls. Maybe it was the effort. Obviously, you're trying to win games, and that's kind of the same thing we went through with New Orleans in the first couple games. They outplayed us, they out-hustled us, and obviously we're not trying to lose, but they got every 50-50 ball. They made every big shot. They made free throws down the stretch.
So just talk to me about the adjustment process within a series. You're saying all that happened to you. Was there no plan to adjust within the series, or is it just too hard at that point, and were the Sixers just unable to do it against Boston?
I'm sure they tried to adjust, but once you get down 2-0, once you get down 3-0, the numbers are against you, the odds are against you, and you're trying to get one game at a time, but it's hard. And when a team understands that no team has ever come back from 3-0, the pressure rises and the other team gets a little bit more comfortable.
Well, and when you play a series where it went 5 games, Game 1 was decisively won by Boston. Game 4 was decisively won by Philly. Game 2, 3, and 5 were 50-50 games. I think most of the game, actually, 75-25 Philly games.
Yeah.
And they lost all 3. Like, they were up 22 points in the mid-second quarter of Game 2, and they lost. They were up 4 with less than a minute left in overtime of Game 3, and they lost. They were up 4 with less than 90 seconds left last night, and they lost. If you go 0 for 3 on games that you have control of at the end, you can't win. Like, they could have won this series 4-1. With better late-game execution, this series could be over in their favor. That's jarring that it happened the way it did.
Yeah, from a coaching standpoint, too, you could see the Celtics made some tremendous adjustments. Even in last night's game, they decided, okay, we're going to start TJ. All right, Brad Stevens, you know what he told him? You know what? We're going to bang him. We're going to post him up. They ate him alive to start the game. What did they start to do late in the game? You might have forgot what their game plan was. No, Boston went right back. In the fourth quarter, they went right back to posting up whoever they thought was the weak link in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, they hit the 3-ball this year at pace. They ran and shot the 3. They weren't able to do this in this 5-game series.
We've been talking a lot about Ben Simmons. I know we're going to get back to it, but the other part of this that we thought, or at least I thought, where Philly was going to have a major advantage was Joel Embiid either against Baines or Horford, and he was totally neutralized. I thought he was outplayed by Horford. He got his points, but he was inefficient from a shooting perspective, and he averages more turnovers than any post-up big man that I can remember. He was turning the ball over 3 times a game. Like, you handle the ball all the time. 3 turnovers is the most you're comfortable with in a game, right? Maybe 4?
Yeah, you're trying to turn the ball over, but that's another thing. Him trying to score, trying to, generate some offense for that team, understanding that they were facing elimination. He's essentially the one who coined the trust the process, so he felt like the pressure was going to be on him, and he had a chance to finish down in the paint late in that game and smoke the layup. But I thought that he played hard. I thought that Al Horford's experience, having played in the playoffs, being a jack-of-all-trades guy who can shoot the three, he can initiate an offense, he can defend multiple positions. I think that showed, and people complained about him being an all-star. People complained about the amount of money he makes, but I think he's a guy most teams and players would want to play with.
CJ, one of the things we've been talking about all morning is what the final piece is for this Sixers team if they're going to take it to the next level next year. And it's maybe bringing in a big superstar, a Paul George, a LeBron James, whoever they could possibly get. Do you think that's what they're missing, is one big superstar for them to take it one step further in this process?
I don't even necessarily think they need a superstar. Obviously, that would help if they got another player, but I think internal development is going to be big. Guys have gotten better over the course of their career. Obviously, they were hurt at the beginning. Implementing J.J. Redick, a veteran guy who can shoot, who can do a lot of different things, helped them. Marco, who hit the big shot they thought was the walk-off game winner, he's helped them immensely, but I think the biggest transformation is going to come from within. Embiid, understanding that he's got to take care of the ball, make better decisions in the post when the double team comes. I think that's going to come as he gets more experience, and the mask could have played a factor in his vision. And then I think the development of Ben Simmons. Once he gets a jump shot, whether that's 15 feet, 12 feet, whatever the case may be, that changes how you guard them. And then the number 1 pick, Markelle Fultz, getting more comfortable in playing.
When you say once Ben Simmons gets a jump shot, I believe it's impossible that he comes back next year. No. Not impossible that he gets jump shot. That he comes back next year the same shooter. I think it's impossible that he doesn't come back next year as a markedly improved shooter. Now, that doesn't mean he needs a 3. Doesn't mean he has a 3. But a guy that he only took 2 shots out of the paint the entire series. Like, that's jarring. That is to CeCe's point. How likely is it, in your eyes, as a player developing between year 1 and year 2 at 20 years old, that he comes back next year as a plausible shooter?
Yeah, he's actually year 3 to 4, compare year 1 to 2.
Well, you mean he's actually year 2 to 3. But,
2 to 3,
but,
yes.
Okay, well, after 1 year of playing at 20 years old.
I think it's just going to depend on how much he loves this game, how much time and effort he puts into it. He seems to be obsessed with the game in terms of, watching Magic, breaking down film on LeBron and doing things of that nature. But even Magic had a nice set shot. He could knock down an open 3. He was able to hit mid-range and keep the defense honest. So for him to make that next step and for them to have that elite spacing that they pride themselves on in terms of being able to shoot threes, if he's a threat to shoot the ball, it changes how you guard their whole team.
Right. The other thing about Magic Johnson, I talked to my brother a lot about basketball. And he said that we're in an era now where we just grab Magic Johnson, Lonzo Ball. Oh, he's the next Magic Johnson. We think that everyone that has height and can dribble the ball somewhat, like they're the next point guard at 6'10". We had one time in NBA history, how long we been playing the game, Nick?
Well, 93 years, something like that?
We had one point guard at 6'10". So now to think we're just going to find one on the side of the road, like Magic was always a point guard. Even at youth basketball, he was the biggest guy, but he was always a point guard. In high school, he was a point guard. In college, he was a point guard. At what point has Ben Simmons been a point guard? At none. He might have been a point forward at LSU. His basketball fundamentals weren't enhanced there. By that, stay there. And now I worry more about he doesn't have the mentality of a guard. All right, he's a bigger guy who handles the ball fairly well for a bigger guy, but the ability to make other players better, to set other players up, to get them the ball where they want to. I don't see that skill, so there's other things that I am worried about besides his shooting.
Should I stay or should I go, said Kawhi Leonard all last season. The San Antonio Spurs star seems to want to be anywhere other than San Antonio. He's been linked to trade rumors since his injury controversy this season and was spotted at a Dodgers game in Los Angeles last night. For reference, he didn't attend one playoff game, but he made it to the Dodgers game. One NBA exec said Kawhi is, quote, as good as gone. Nick, let me start with you. You buying that Kawhi is leaving the Spurs?
Yes.
Good talk.
And I don't want to overreact to him going to this baseball game. But I think that's a terrible look for Kawhi because he didn't go to any of the Spurs playoff games. To not go to a Spurs, even their home playoff games, even the home playoff games right after the head coach's wife tragically passes away, to not go ahead, see.
The only thing about that part is I know Kawhi was in communication with Coach Pop, and they had Kawhi was going to come back if he was going to coach, but he knew that the coach wasn't going to come back, so that's when he decided to stay away. It was kind of agreed upon that he would continue to do his rehab.
And I had heard that as well, that if after the death of Pop's wife, that he was going to coach.
He was in communications with Coach Popovich.
I understand that part of it. But if to not show up as to one of those playoff games, even when the coach isn't going to be there, maybe even more of a reason to show up as a team leader, as the best guy on the team, when your season's on the line, even if you're not going to play, when you obviously can travel, that to me is, whether you agree or disagree with the decision, that to me is all the proof I need that he has mentally moved on from the Spurs as being a member of that basketball team.
Yeah, I think it's crazy, though, he can't go to the Dodgers game. If you're in Los Angeles, why can't I go to a sporting event? Why can't I go see the Dodgers play? Well, what am I supposed to do? Not do anything this summer because I didn't go to the playoff games? I'm not supposed to go to no sporting event when I would normally, in my routine, I would go to some baseball games. I would potentially go to other NBA playoff games. I don't think just because I missed the season, a great portion of the season and the playoffs, I'm not going to go anywhere socially. That has nothing to do with my decision, do I want to be in San Antonio or not?
Listen, I'm not saying he can't go to the games. What I am saying is the only, I thought, plausible rationale that could square the circle of Kawhi wants to be with the Spurs and Kawhi isn't at these playoff games is the rehab in New York is so intensive he has to stay there. And if he is just chilling in Los Angeles, I'm not judging him for going to the game. It's just, to me, further evidence that he has decided, I'm not on the Spurs anymore.
Well, the evidence has been there. It's just a matter of when people wanted to look at it or not. So now, because he's going to a baseball game, you're like, wow.
Well, I've been saying that I thought he was going. I just think it's further evidence of it. But go ahead.
Yeah, listen, I get a little upset when people in sports are people who are famous that now they can't do other stuff that normal people can do. If a normal person can go to a baseball game, well, damn, I can go to a baseball game. Kawhi going to a baseball game in L.A., it's not a bad look for him, and it's not sending some type of message that he's gone from San Antonio or not, all right? Their relationship and what happened, him being misdiagnosed by San Antonio, all right, that's not going to go away. All right, they're not going to be able to change that anytime soon.
What do you think is going to happen next year? Do you still, I know you have gone sort of back and forth on whether he comes back or not. So him going to a Dodgers game, none of that factors into where you are with where Kawhi ends up next year.
Okay, first, I have not gone back and forth as far as is Kawhi going to stay in San Antonio or is he going to leave? The potential of him leaving San Antonio, that's real, all right? That's a real thing. Kawhi being upset at the management there at San Antonio, that's a real thing. People in Kawhi's group that want him to leave San Antonio, that's a real thing. That got nothing to do with Chris Carter.
Sure.
Now, I just know it's hard to turn down that max contract.
They can offer him, so the audience understands, they can offer him $219 million. No other team can offer more than around $140 million. It is a drastic sum of money he would have to turn down. And that's why the misdiagnosis part of this has to be part of the math you do. Because if the rationale or the thought initially was Kawhi wants to leave San Antonio so he can get a richer shoe deal.
No, that wasn't. He would have never, if he wouldn't have been injured, he would have never approached ever leaving. That thought wouldn't have come in his head.
Okay, so that's critical that people understand because you cannot make up, Kawhi Leonard cannot make up the money. If it's about a shoe deal, that means it's about money. And no shoe deal is going to make up the money that he would be leaving on the table by leaving San Antonio. It would have to be about more than that. Tell me if you think this is fair. Not just a misdiagnosis, but then a pressure to come back and play. Some of the things Parker and Ginobili said that our friend Steven Jackson thinks they would only say with the consent from Greg Popovich. Maybe an unfair representation in Kawhi's eyes of what he was really going through.
I think it has a big deal to do, zero to do with the players, all right? Because they're not going to be around there. They're not players that are part of San Antonio's future. Now, thinking that Kawhi took some message, that it was an indirect message from Popovich, I don't believe Kawhi is looking at it that way. But it's a real situation. Man, how many superstars? Am I going to be able to get another superstar to be able to come to San Antonio? That's real. And I believe that and the injury led to Kawhi believe, is this the best place for my basketball future, which led us to where we are right now.
If it's about the money, if this whole thing was about money, that's where you're going to get the most money, is by staying in San Antonio. He has shown in my opinion, he has shown zero signs of committing to San Antonio, of wanting to be on this Spurs team, of wanting to play for the Spurs.
And when it comes to the max contract and the money, it should be noted, because of the way things have gone, I'm not as certain that it's a foregone conclusion that they offer him the full max contract, that they even put that in front of him. You also have to keep in mind the owners.
If they do that, then he's definitely going to leave.
But you got to keep in mind this part of it. No one's talked about this. The owner of the Spurs and his wife got a divorce. And I bring that up because the financial ramifications of that, as the Peter Holt, and I think it's Juliana Holt, she's now running. Like, it's an odd situation there. And we've seen this in sports before, where there's a divorce at the ownership level, what that does for the individual finances. A team like San Antonio that's not in a super lucrative market.
The team is concerned about the difference in that 70 to 80 million they would have to pay. So the divorce might play a role. So it's not just Kawhi, it's also the organization. But if the organization decides to do that, divorce or no divorce, they need Kawhi. They need to offer him the max. If they don't, there's a great probability he won't be there.
All right, let's take a break. Coming up, the Cavs live and die by LeBron James, but is that a sustainable formula? It's next on First Things First. Hi, everyone, and welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolf. That's the Hall of Famer, Chris Carter. That is Nick Wright. Before you can say anything, I'm holding my own L this morning. That's what I'm doing.
And on behalf of all the Celtics organization, more importantly, are you holding my money?
I do owe you a little bit of money. I'm going to let it ride.
You owed me money before last night.
And I let it ride that time.
Ride.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I mean...
You know me, you know where I live, you know where my children go to school. So I can let it ride.
I know, I mean, wow. I mean, it's not that serious at the moment. But it's good to know that you and I are on the same wavelength.
Why don't you tell the fine folks at home when I texted you this morning? Because
Jenna likes to text me at 1:30 in the morning for reasons I still haven't understood yet, Chris Carter. So
you want in on that? I can get you on part of my texting routine as well.
I think he's in on this.
You want me to start and tell you why I lost money last night?
Exactly right.
Why don't we do that part? We got ourselves a series now. For anyone who doesn't believe in home court advantage, I present to you the NBA's Eastern Conference Finals, where if you're Boston, you only win at home. And if you're Cleveland, you too only win at home. Cavs beat the Celtics last night to tie up this series at 2 games apiece. LeBron James put up an easy 44 points in the win. These two teams now head back to Boston for the start of a best-of-3. So, Chris Carter, I start with you. Tell me how this was done. How were the Cavs able to win Game 4?
Well, one thing is the Celtics and their story on the road. It's been well documented. They got one win in Philadelphia in game number 3. The other games, most of those games, they haven't even been in the game. They are not the same type of team on the road. But how the Cavs got it done in game number 4 was making shots early, getting off to the fast start so their role players can play with confidence. And LeBron James playing a great all-around game, especially offensively, was really special. Very, very rare you're going to be able to score that many points, which he did in 44 and only shoot the ball 28 times. You don't see it too much in the NBA. So LeBron, functioning at a high level, being very, very efficient offensively, only needs a little bit of support. And at this point in the series where teams are starting to figure out what the other teams are doing, the young genius, and some people call the best coach in the NBA, doesn't seem like he can get the type of looks that he's getting for them offensively that they got in the previous 3 series and games 1 and 2 in Boston. So those are the stories where we are. That's how Cleveland gets win number 2 in game number 4 last night.
All right, so I want to address things Chris mentioned in reverse order. Start with Brad Stevens. The reality is Ty Lue has made some adjustments in games 3 and 4 that Brad Stevens has not adjusted to. This game was lost in the first quarter. In that first quarter, Al Horford got 2 shots. That made it 6 total shots for the Celtics' best player in the 5 opening quarters being played in Cleveland. They were outscored by 46 points in those opening 5 quarters in Cleveland. That is an adjustment Brad Stevens needs to figure out how to make, where the Celtics have been at an enormous advantage all year long, where I've talked about them starting games up essentially 10-0 before the ball is tipped because of how they're going to be out of timeouts. Ty Lue is playing him to a stalemate out of timeouts, and the Celtics have been awful where they are typically great. That end of the quarter stuff. Understanding time, score, situation. There was a play last night where Stevens is screaming for his guys to take it out. They don't. They end up, Jaylen Brown, I think, ends up missing a dunk, goes back down the other way. So execution-wise, they haven't been as good as they had been in the postseason, home or away, but particularly at home. On LeBron, it was an odd LeBron game. Only 3 assists. 7 turnovers, most of them totally needless turnovers, trying to make the A triple plus pass when he didn't need to. But the way he scored those 44 points, it was methodical, and it was if you watched the game without ever checking a box score, I don't think you'd ever thought he had 44, because he never had one giant burst. He had 11 in the first, 11 in the second, 13 in the third, 9 in the fourth. It was, if such a thing exists, a quiet 44-point game from LeBron, particularly because he wasn't also getting other guys involved with the assists. And then lastly, the Cavs played one great quarter of defense. They played a great first quarter of defense. Then I thought they lapsed back into a lot of their bad defensive tendencies that had hurt them in Boston. But when you win the first quarter by 15 points and the other team's offensively challenged, it's going to be hard for them to mount a sustained comeback.
Have the Cavs figured out now, do you think, how to beat Boston, how to deal with their adjustments, how to contain Al Horford? Is this the kind of play you're expecting to see now when it shifts back to Boston?
I mean, it's a great question. I thought that even though they lost game 2, and going back, looking at game 2 yesterday before game 4 was played, I thought that Cleveland gained some control, even though they didn't win game 2. They played 192 minutes, Jenna, and the Celtics have trailed 122 of them. So it's 2-2. And sometimes it's when you get the wins and when you get the losses. But I would say right now, the Cleveland team, in a 3-game series, Cleveland is in more control than I think I do. I trust them a little bit better. Yes, I do, because I believe they can win one game in Boston. And what the Celtics has shown me on the road, I don't think they can win that one game coming back to Cleveland, game number 6.
CeCe broke it down by a minute-by-minute standpoint, but the Celtics won the first and second half of game 1 and the second half of game 2. So there have been 8 halves of basketball. Those are the 3 halves the Celtics won. Cleveland controlled the first half of game 2, and they've controlled every part of the games except for a stretch in the fourth quarter yesterday of these 2 games back in Cleveland. And once again, and this is what is, I think, concerning for Boston. Boston loses game 3 because the Cavs go 17 of 34 from 3. Yesterday, they only make 8 threes. Yesterday, they turn the ball over nearly 10 times more than Boston. Much like game 3. LeBron gets all this help, but no one gets even 15 points. Right. And so it was a multitude of players chipping in, 7 here, 9 here, 11 here. But Kevin Love had a bad game, saved 2 plays in the fourth quarter. JR, for the second straight game, yeah, he hit 3 threes, but that was the entirety of his offensive contributions. It's not like the Celtics are being slayed by, well, Love went 25 and 18 and there was just no answer for him. The Cavs are getting a little bit from a lot of guys, and they've had 2 consecutive really good LeBron James games.
One thing that's been a big difference is the overall energy with the Cavs and how much energy they're exerting on the defensive end. If you say, well, what is the difference with them not playing? They play defense like a team that could try to win a championship. They have in those 2 games in Cleveland. You mentioned after that first quarter, the big first quarter, not necessarily the defense you'd want to see the other 3, but in the 8 quarters that they've played in Cleveland, big difference in the energy output on the defensive end.
So then you look at home court advantage, and if that is really such a thing, or if the Celtics got outplayed and will continue to get outplayed as this series moves forward. forward. It seems from watching the game, yeah, maybe no one else had a ton of points other than LeBron, but they kind of figured out how to contain the Celtics.
Well, Terry Rozier's a big problem for the Celtics right now. I understand Rozier, he had 16 points and 10 assists.
Statistically, he had a decent.
But he shot terribly from the field. He made some awful decisions. And defensively, if he's on the court, he is the mismatch every single Cleveland Cavalier is going after.
Yeah.
And if Rozier's not out there, Shane Larkin's hurt, now you're in a situation, is Marcus Smart going to play the point? Or are we going to ask Jaylen Brown to play the point? The Celtics, I think everyone at this table would agree with this. I'm almost certain Brad Stevens would agree with this. The Celtics play for their season on Wednesday. Like, if they lose on Wednesday, that's a wrap for them. The Cavs can lose Wednesday and potentially be okay. The Celtics play for their season Wednesday. Not a lot of time between, as we sit here Tuesday morning and the game Wednesday evening, to make the counter adjustments to tie-lose adjustments.
Yeah, and that first half of the game in game number 5 becomes the most important half of basketball in the 2017-2018 season. Because as we saw, the momentum, when the game switched game 2 to game 3 in Cleveland, we saw Cleveland take control of what now we know to be 2 games. We only saw the first half in game number 3. Can the Celtics do that in game number 5? I believe is very, very important.
So LeBron James gets a quiet 44 points, if that is
44.
such a thing, and this series is tied at 2 games apiece. Coming up, will missing a key player slow down the Golden State Warriors tonight? We'll preview that series next on First Things First.
At Buffalo Wild Wings, we'll admit that we often go overboard with our limited time offerings. We just can't help ourselves. Take our new signature sampler. For $15, you get wings and 3 shareable options, like fried pickles or cheese curds. Then there's our aptly named over-the-top nachos, a literal mountain of crispy tortilla chips loaded with your choice of pulled pork or honey barbecue chicken, corn, jalapenos, and more. Then top it all off with our new Platinum Margarita. Go overboard with us today at Buffalo Wild Wings. Wings, beer, sports. Available for a limited time while supplies last. Please drink responsibly.
Rockets Warriors in just a second, but first, Marcus Smart blocks LeBron, outlets to Terry Rozier. Rozier throws the alley-oop to Tatum. That's a play.
Was a good play. Good help defense by Marcus Smart, saving the ball, not under the bucket, saving it, giving it some air. Nice transition bucket, rare bucket, transition bucket by the Celtics.
And the most impressive thing of this was the time of the game. This was with seconds left in the quarter. They had to go that fast down the court.
0 dribbles.
Expire. Exactly right.
Next, game-changing block by Tristan Thompson on Terry Rozier.
Jenna, game-changing is not too strong of a way to put it. That would have cut it to 8, and then the Cavs went down the other side and got it back to 12 to keep the
great 2-game sequence by Tristan Thompson. The energy that he brought, the change in assignment by Ty Lue, putting him in the starting lineup, might be the move of the series.
And finally, Kevin Love throwing a beautiful full-court pass. Watch LeBron get up over 2 Celtics and score. Watch the pass, though.
This is what he used to do in high school, like our boy Joe, all-state wide receiver, before he breaks his wrist.
Nice,
and
Joe.
they retiring, the LeBron James, they retired him. Baker Mayfield's in the house. He's jealous. LeBron's not playing across the street, across town.
See, more impressive, though, the pass or the catch?
The pass.
Oh. So you always surprise me, man. I'm always surprised by your answer.
The catch was impressive, though, because he caught it with his left hand. He was able to hold him off with his right hand and forearm and was able to catch it with his left.
Did you get that?
I got it.
Awesome.
We might need to bring back Hall of Fame hands today for that.
Slightly different NBA story out west where the Warriors lead the Rockets 2-1 in their best of 7. Rockets hoping not to repeat what happened in Game 3 when they got blown out by 41 points. Hoping to contain Steph Curry, who went off for 35 points, and hoping to avoid a tough 3-1 deficit to the behemoth Warriors. Rockets head coach Mike D'Antoni not worried, because you got to have faith.
Right now, to me, Golden State has all the pressure. They got to win tomorrow night. You know, we should come in with a little bit of swagger and giddy up in our game and see what we get.
Swagger and giddy up. You've been really enjoying Mike D'Antoni's postseason.
I love Mike D'Antoni, man. I mean, he's just lying all the time, but it is entertaining.
Wait, why?
I mean, none of it's true. The pressure's on Golden State. I understand what he's trying to say. He's trying to say, if they lose, we have home court back.
Well,
and
listen,
so
you've been coaching too long in this league. Just say what you're trying to say. Don't have us read between the lines. That's an idiotic statement.
So the question is, who's under more pressure? Well, considering the fact that since the Warriors got Kevin Durant, they haven't lost a single home playoff game. They've never been tied in a series aside from 0-0. And no one's ever taken them to 6, much less 7 games. I would say the team that could fall down 3-1.
What do you mean they've never been tied in a series?
Other than 0-0, a team's never tied them in a series. Never won 1, 2-2. They've been up 2-0 in every series they've
dominated every playoff series.
Well, the Houston series, they
until
were 1-1.
Prior to the Houston series, they'd never been tied in a series. I apologize.
Yes.
They have not lost a home game, and no one has taken them 6 games since Durant's been there. So obviously the team that could go down 3-1 to that team is the team under more pressure. This is a game the Rockets have to win to have a shot to win the series. Golden State does not have to win this game to have a shot in this series.
Mike D'Antoni, you guys let me know, what's a bigger series he's ever been in than this one? Forget about Game 4. Has he ever been in a bigger series than this one?
He's been in, I think, one as big, a conference finals with Nash, but never a bigger one.
Tell me one series bigger than than this one.
Never.
None?
Never.
What about James Harden? He been in a bigger series? The finals.
As a sixth man, but different responsibility.
Okay, what about Chris Paul?
No.
Oh, he's never been to the finals.
Right.
So the team that has all the trophies, all the pedigrees, all the MVPs.
They have more pressure.
They have more. This is, to me, I had a problem when he said something like this during the season as far as the 65 wins, what that was going to warrant them, as if that was some type of award, that's a trophy. If you don't win the NBA championship, you're just a team that had a great regular season. So I just hate when a coach just blatantly just lies. Give us some information that's going to help us as fans. Don't try to turn it around we don't know what's going on. All the pressure is on you. Giddy up or swagger. I love to see Caucasians always talk about swagger. To me, that's that's one of the funnier things I've ever.
Jenna's face.
Yeah,
oh God, Jenna's face is. Can someone please that can make gifs on the internet? Or
I just love how they've added that to their vocabulary. Oh, swagger.
I learn every day.
All right, let me ask.
I'm learning every day, and I put that in on Wednesday, so I don't want to take it out quite yet.
Let me ask you a question, Chris Carter.
Well, it's been out for a while.
What about the aspect of talking to your team through the media? If he's trying to communicate to his team in the locker room, guys, pressure's on them. They got to defend home court.
I thought you're trying to tell the team not to listen to the media. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, okay, team, we're going to block out everything, because that's what most coaches do.
But I don't think that's what D'Antoni's done. D'Antoni's a different. I haven't heard him say we're blocking out the noise.
Let me tell you what you have to do with professional athletes. You can't lie to them. All right? Now, if you can tell them in a meeting, hey, guys, I'm going to send a different message to the media, you have to stay on the same page. Why all of a sudden now the players and the coach aren't on the same message points? Typically, you hear the coach, you hear the players say some version of that. After game number 3 loss, what did the coach say? The team was soft. Harden, what did Harden say? Soft. He said the same thing that the coach said. So you can't be trying to talk to the team through the media when you're telling the team not to listen to the media.
Do you think D'Antoni's telling his guys that the pressure's all on the Warriors
I think he is, and I think that's actually, unfortunately, potentially a bit of an indictment on the players on the Rockets. Because here's the thing. When we talk about the best player in the series, we just talked about LeBron, right? At no point would his coach say to him in a must-win game, pressure's on the other guys. He would say to him, we have to win. You know we have to win. Go do what is expected of you. Because he has a track record and history of rising to the occasion. I think Mike D'Antoni, if this is his message to the guys, which I believe it is because he knows that as great as James Harden is and as great as Chris Paul is, not necessarily the guys who play the best under the most pressure. They are guys who play better thinking, oh, this
So you think D'Antoni thinks he knows his players better Like, he's only been with Chris Paul 7 months, and he knows those players better to send out some message that's not true?
I think D'Antoni is trying to convince CP3 and James Harden the pressure's on the Warriors.
That's just hard for me to concede. That's hard. That's a hard conclusion to try to pick, because coaches, they don't do things like that. Like, you can't try to play mind games with in a championship series. You can't, unless you've got a long history with these players, and I don't believe him to have that, or a long history of having success. I don't believe you can draw those conclusions from that coach, what he's trying to do to his star players to relieve pressure from them.
All right, so let's get into this next game, if you will. The Warriors now will probably a little bit light-handed without, I guess, Iggy is questionable or doubtful. At this point. We're probably not going to see him. How does that affect the Warriors? And maybe could there be like a sliver of truth that there is a little more pressure on them as a result?
Take the pressure. I would take the pressure part out of it and just talk about how Iggy, the loss of Andre Iguodala, affects them. I think it potentially affects them greatly.
Yes, absolutely. It affects them on the offensive end. Affects him because he is a shooter. He is a shot maker. He's also a wing defender. So offense, defense on their rotation. What they typically do is they switch from 1-2 through the 5 position. That's one thing that they do and have done a great job of it. That's why they start the Hampton 5. It's not because all those guys met. It's because it's a better defensive assignment. And on the offensive end, they can spread the court more because Iggy is a better spot-up shooter. Their rotation off the bench. So we talked about offense, now defense, now their rotation off the bench. Who's the first guy off the bench now?
Right.
But Swaggy P? I mean, he's not the defender.
Swaggy P might have to start now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that any team in the Western Conference would love to see Swaggy P starting.
Absolutely.
Not known for his defense, doesn't have the necessarily length that Iggy has, and you have to start watching them. They're going to hunt him up. And they're going to hunt Steph up. So now they're going to have 2 guys on the defense for the Warriors that they can hunt up.
And I want people to understand what CeCe's saying when he says Iggy's more of a threat from the outside. You got to keep in mind, when Iggy starts, he's starting in place of Kevon Looney, JaVale McGee, or Zaza Pachulia. Nobody thinks Iggy's a dead-eye shooter, but if he's taking the place of your starting center, when none of their starting centers shoot threes, he absolutely is more of a threat from three.
He's not as good a shooter, spot-up shooter, Swaggy P, but he's a better ball handler.
Of course.
Better defender, and definitely a better passer.
And this is where the Warriors' odd roster construction can bite them a little bit. They could have found out 3 centers were doubtful for the game and been fine. When you talk about perimeter players, if you have the Hamptons 5 as your 5 starters, those are all, except for Draymond, perimeter-based players. Here's the entirety of the perimeter players on their bench. Swaggy P, Sean Livingston, and G League call-up Quinn Cook. That's it. That's all of it, because they're carrying 6 centers for a reason that I don't understand. The team plays center less than anybody in the league. So if Iggy's out, maybe they'll start Kevon Looney. But still, your bench gets much, much shorter. The Rockets needed some reason to believe that the variables are going to be different than they were in Game 3. Iggy being out is not enough to make them a favorite in this game. It's not going to move the Vegas line a bit. But all of a sudden, if Steph gets in foul trouble, or if one of those other guys gets in foul trouble, now Nick Young's got to play big minutes. Now Sean Livingston's got to do more than regular 15 minutes. That could be problematic for them.
All right, we'll talk more about this. But on the other side, let's get back into that series out east. Why can't the Celtics win on the road? Next, first things first. All right, to the NBA draft now. Reports are the Knicks have the hots for Oklahoma point guard Trae Young. Knicks have the 9th overall pick. CC, do you expect having the hots to turn into a relationship?
Man, I hope not. I hope not. I'm not in the small. When it comes to athletes, I want someone big. I believe there's other guys in the draft that potentially that you can get. As a point guard, do you see him matched up with Kristaps for the rest of his career? And, to me, I don't see that in New York City. Fizdale said, as the head coach in his first press conference, they were going to be a defensive dominant team. So if you take him with the number 9, I don't know how you ever get to that.
You just need 4 other great defenders. I love this idea. I love this pairing, particularly if Kristaps is going to be a slow recovery with the injury. Listen,
he might not play in 2018-19.
Exactly my point. Take a year. Trae's going to take a ton of lumps his rookie year. If the Knicks are awful next year, who cares? I think a Trae Young, Kristaps, Porzingis combo, because of both of those guys being able to shoot from range, both those guys being unique prospects, is...
I think he has tremendous bust potential.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
All right, let's move on to Boogie Cousins.
Unless he hits a mid-life growth spurt.
DeMarcus is, quote, very interested in re-signing with the Pelicans. The star center is coming off a torn Achilles, missed the end of the season, and will be a free agent this offseason. Nick, should New Orleans bring Boogie back?
Man, I've been very consistent on this. Absolutely, they should. Now, it's going to ask Alvin Gentry to be able to coach this team two different styles, a style with Boogie on the court and a style with Boogie off the court. But you cannot lose a top 15 player in the league for nothing in the offseason. If you re-sign him and it doesn't work, you can trade him for something. But, yes, you have to bring him back even coming off the Achilles.
Alvin Gentry had some phenomenal things to say. He said every person in the organization that has been asked about Boogie Cousins bringing him back, 100% have said we're going to bring him back. So that's a great vote of confidence for Boogie. Boogie's out also, he might have to take a little less money.
Yep.
You know, so he's got to be able to work with the Pelicans to try to keep these two, him and the Brow, together, which is a special combination.
All right, finally, back to the Kawhi Leonard saga. According to reports, the Spurs hope to mend fences and offer Kawhi the Supermax contract. Just to remind folks, that would be $219 million over 5 years. CC, should the Spurs offer Kawhi the Supermax?
If you want Kawhi in a Spurs uniform, because there's no way he's in a Spurs uniform for anything less than that. So you got no chance of retaining Kawhi by not offering him the Supermax contract. That's what they should do. He's a Supermax player. Like, what's the question? Is he a top 5 player? Should he get a Supermax contract? Does he have a long-lasting injury that's going to hurt his career? If he doesn't have that, then it doesn't make sense for them not to offer him the Supermax.
I don't think it's quite as cut and dry as you're making it out to be because of what happened last year, but I would still offer him the Supermax. I would still, it's not...
How many players in the NBA do we have on a max contract?
Well, on a max contract, a lot. On the Supermax, only a handful, because you have to qualify for it.
Yes.
You have to either be league MVP or first-team All-NBA. That's the way he qualified for it, was being first-team All-NBA.
Who was the last guy that qualified for a Supermax that didn't get them Supermax?
Nobody.
Oh.
No, nobody. But he's also the first guy to qualify it, and then in the following year only play less than 10 games and seemingly not want to be with the organization. That's why it's not...
That's the key. Seemingly not want to be with the organization, not sit on the bench. I know that you guys don't have an issue with this. It bothered me a little bit that he doesn't sit on the bench during the playoffs.
Oh, it bothered Jenna. I did have an issue with it for the home game.
And I know what you definitely did have an issue with was the game that Greg Popovich's wife passed away. That game, the next 2 games after that, he wasn't on the bench either, and he wasn't. And I know that he spoke to Pop on the phone and somehow got this, blessing to not have to be there. That was what affected me a little bit.
But here's the thing that people need to understand with the Supermax contract. This is not a situation where Kawhi Leonard could sign it and then demand a trade. If you sign someone to the Supermax, you cannot trade them for a full year. So if he signs it, he is saying, I am back with the Spurs. I am re-upping with the Spurs. I would be nervous if that rule wasn't in place. That Kawhi would say, yeah, I'll sign, and then immediately say, trade me, I'm not coming in. But that's not available to him. So, listen, he is one of the 8 best players in the sport, even with the concerns about the injury. He is, without question, one of the 8 best players in the sport. He finished higher than LeBron in the MVP voting just a year ago. You can't not retain him if you have the opportunity to retain him.
And I could care less if he went to the game. You know what it meant? It meant zero. All right? They were a bad team. All right? The season was over with. He communicated with the coach. Him and the coach do have a relationship. Him and the coach probably have the only thing that's going to be able to potentially salvage the relationship, the communication that they've had with each other. There's no one else in the organization that can talk to Kawhi or try to build a reason with Kawhi. So him being in New York City, working with his doctors, rehabbing was the best thing for him. And it's better for the organization that he's getting healthy compared to sitting on the bench there with Alfred. What type of support? What was he going to do? Was he going to help him?
Well, whatever type of support it is, it's the type of support every other injured player in the playoffs is offering their team.
Okay, but so what?
You can say it doesn't matter. I get that.
It really doesn't matter.
Okay,
You think that's going to affect them offering him $200 million with Kawhi's resume? Because what's stronger, Kawhi's resume or him not being on the bench the last 4 games of the season?
I said I would offer him the money, but I can still say I think that, just like if Kyrie was not showing up to these playoff games, I would think it was a bad look, just like if Boogie wasn't showing up to the Pelicans playoff.
Right, but in the real world, it doesn't matter, though. Like, it doesn't matter that the guy's not there on the bench. Is it going to help the team? No. It is because as a fan, we want the guy there. In the locker room, it doesn't matter. To the players, it doesn't matter.
But whether it helps the team or not, would you say it affected the team? We did.
No, it didn't affect the team. They were a bad team.
Right, but we did hear, guys, Manu, we heard Tony Parker talk about how much they...
You know the reason why it didn't? Because they can't play. They can't play. Did you hear what his teammates said about him? Did you hear what Tony Parker said? How his injury was so much worse than so I'm supposed to come there and support them? No, absolutely. It don't work that way. It don't work that way. You can say whatever you want about me when I'm out of town, and now all of a sudden you're getting ready to get your doors blown off. You want me to come support you? No, that's not getting ready to happen. All right? Ginobili's career is over with. Tony Parker, he says he wants to play. He's only a shell of himself. The Spurs better be worried about Kawhi, because the only way they're going to put another banner in the rafters, which is important to them, is if they have Kawhi Leonard.
All right, let's get back to the Celtics now. And I get it. Everything's just better at home. Your bed, your routine, your family. Road families are weird. Nobody knows about road woes more than the Celtics. No one. They're now just 1-6 in road playoff games this year. Put that up against a 9-0 home playoff record. Well, the series with the Cavs now tied at 2 shifts back to Boston tomorrow night. Here's head coach Brad Stevens.
It's the best 2 out of 3 to go to the NBA Finals. Doesn't get better than that. I mean, ultimately, anybody that didn't think this was going to be tough, everything is tough. And, in this deal, it's a blast to have to grit your teeth, get up off the mat, and go after it again. That's part of it. That's part of what makes these guys on both sides special. It's part of what makes the Western Conference team special. They're able to do it. They're able to block out everything that doesn't matter and go compete. And that's what we'll go do.
All right, Chris, are the Celtics' playoff woes, is that a sign of this team being young and inexperienced, the fact that they can't seem to put it all together when they're away from Boston?
It's a sign of a couple things. It's a sign of a young team because it's harder to play on the road. And it's a sign that absent of a superstar. Young guys, Jaylen Brown's not ready to be in the NBA superstar category. Tatum is not ready to be in that. Rozier is a backup player, could be a starting point guard somewhere, but that superstar status to be able to put out a fire when the team goes on a run, to be able to make a high-energy play, either a slam dunk, knock down a 3, to be able to take energy out from being on the road when the home crowd is taking over the game. They don't have that. It's not a problem. They got two guys that are capable of doing that, and Gordon Hayward and Kyrie. They're injured. This is a team that is trying to get somewhere without their star players. So it makes sense that they would struggle on the road. We thought that the young players would struggle at home and on the road. At home, they played magnificent. And they played magnificent, their top 3 scorers going from the regular season to the postseason. But when you're playing against the best teams, when you're in Eastern Conference Final, Western Conference Final, these types of things can be exploited because the scouts look at your weaknesses and they target them. And you start to see more evidence of what you're weak at, what you're lacking. And that's what we're seeing with the Celtics.
And, Jenna, I know you want Danny Ainge to watch the show. I don't know that he does, but Brad Stevens might, because you made a point last week that Brad Stevens then echoed over the weekend, which was this was the best road team in the Eastern Conference during the regular season, and now they can't do it during the playoffs. And the answer to that is, well, during the regular season for 65 of those games, you had the superstar. You had Kyrie Irving. You can't look at what they did on the road during the regular season and say, why can't they do it on the road in the playoffs? For a number of reasons, but one of them is it's not the same team that you were dealing with. But the other aspect of this, and this, go ahead.
But it's also not the same stage. So if you want to say there's no superstar, there's also not the, if you want to use, for lack of a better term, pressure of playing in the Eastern Conference Finals where there's a lot on the line and it can end your season. You also don't have that during the regular season.
Right, but, there was less pressure, if you will, in the first round against Milwaukee. And they got beat down in the 3 games in Milwaukee, a team that is poorly coached, a team that has, much like the Cavs series, best player in the series on Milwaukee. Next 3 or 4 best guys are on Boston. Yeah. But the thing that's concerning, if I'm Brad Stevens or if I'm a Celtics fan, is I don't mind so much that at home we're scoring 112 points a game and on the road we're scoring 99 points a game. I care tremendously that at home we're allowing 101 and on the road we're allowing 111. Like, your defense should travel better than that. One of the reasons the Celtics in the regular season were, aside from Kyrie Irving, a good road team is they had the #1 defense in the NBA. You talk all the time. Role player shots aren't going to go in as much. Young player shots aren't going to go in as much away from home. That shouldn't affect these 2 games in Cleveland. They have been disorganized defensively. They're always trying hard, but they're not communicating as well. That's what's concerning for Boston.
Man, Al Horford, their center. Like, man, he played great. First round, great. Second round, great. You talk about potentially him and Brad Stevens being the MVP of this team. Game 1 and Game 2. But since Tristan Thompson's come in, he's shooting 27% against Tristan Thompson. That's a real thing. You shouldn't have a veteran player with a max contract on the road struggling the way he is. But he is your go-to guy. He's your go-to leader when you don't have Gordon Hayward, when you don't have Kyrie. So not having those guys shows up more on the road than it would in home games.
And you mentioned Tristan Thompson, and I've been president of the Brad Stevens fan club, or maybe vice president to our friend Chris Mannix. Ty Lue made the adjustment. Ty Lue said, I'm inserting Tristan Thompson in the starting lineup. People were curious about that.
It works.
Brad Stevens has not readjusted from there. So if I'm going to elevate you to one of, if not the best coach in basketball, you got to have a good counterpunch to lose counterpunch.
Yeah, to be the best coach in the NBA, which you said.
Right, absolutely.
You said he was.
I said he's the best coach of the NBA.
It's time to make some adjustments.
He thought he made that adjustment. Al Horford came out with a little bit more energy than he did last game, but it still wasn't enough.
Tristan Thompson's a tough matchup for him.
All right, coming up, should we be concerned about Tom Brady? We'll let you know why next. First things first.
Long night, but what a night.
Finally, we got the game that we wanted to see.
Yes.
Finally, we got a close game in this series.
That was the best, most important basketball game that's been played since one you and I were at together. Game 3 of the NBA Finals, the Kevin Durant game. You were not yet in our life yet, Miss Jenna Wolf. We were in Cleveland, and that game ended with a Kevin Durant make.
Yep.
This game,
that was a dark period in our life with Nick and LeBron, but that's also the before Jenna Wolf period.
Yeah, I was just going to say two takeaways. One, you always need more Jenna Wolf in your life.
Of course.
And now you don't have to want anymore.
But man, what a basketball game.
Great game.
What a basketball
All right, let's start there, because starting with needing more me in your life is not good programming. Memo to those whose bosses have ever called them soft. Come in the next day, prove otherwise. After Game 3 of the Western Conference Finals, Rockets head coach Mike D'Antoni said his team was soft. Last night, Game 4 against the Warriors, they responded. James Harden leading the way for the Rockets with 30 points. Chris Paul chipping in 27. We finally got a close, hard-fought game right to the end. But the Rockets, they just fought a little bit harder. They win, evening up this series at 2 games apiece. Here is James Harden after the game.
We've been doing it all year long. That's the main reason we're in this position we're in today. That third game was just one loss. We all know what that is, and we had the mentality that we were going to win Game 4. We talked about it, we preached it, and we came out there and didn't stop. They made runs, of course they were going to, especially at home, and we just kept fighting.
They found a way, and again, it's just. They've done it all year, and they'll keep doing it. And, all we did, too, is just get back to even. It's not like, we're all excited. So we're even with them, but at least we're even with them. We didn't go down 3-1. So it was a must game, but we got a lot of work to be done.
It's the always popular must game. So they won their must game for them. No, he was right.
Yeah, he says after the game, though. Because he had a chance to say it was a must game before the game.
And he didn't.
Oh, after they won, he said it was a must game.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, how did they do this? How were the Rockets able to win Game 4, CC?
Well, tremendous mental effort by them. Because if you start off in Oracle the way they started down 12-0, you're thinking, after losing by 41 points, man, this is how Chris Paul, this is how James Harden, this is how we're going to remember this season, the coach, talking about there was more pressure on the Warriors. The beginning of the game looked like all the pressure was on Houston, and they were not doing well with that pressure. But you can't talk about Houston without talking about their defense, because their defense got them back in the game. They had amazing individual effort. The team effort you could see was there, but that initial jolt that they received from Golden State and Golden State not being able to pull away from them, they immediately evaporated that lead in the second quarter, took a lead at halftime. And when you hold the 2 out of the last 3 years, the world champs, the most explosive offense, the best collection of offensive players we've ever seen together. You hold them to 12 points in the fourth quarter, in the biggest game that we say in almost a year.
3 made shots in the fourth quarter.
I mean, that effort right there by the Houston Rockets. Last year, 26 in defense. This year, up to 6 in defense. Had we seen that in this 3 games? No, we hadn't seen that. So defense is the way, and also the guts of some guys who had come up a little bit short in Chris Paul and Harden coming through in clutch situations.
It was singularly the best defensive performance, given the stakes, given the opponent, any team in the NBA has had all year long. It might be the best defensive performance in the NBA since Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals, when the Cavs held this Warriors team under 90, but that Warriors team didn't have Kevin Durant. You mentioned Chris Paul and James Harden. Man, this thing looked like it was going the other way. Then not only are the Warriors up 12-0, James Harden early in the game has as wide open of a shot as you will ever see an NBA player, let alone the guy that's going to win MVP, get. He thought about it, thought about it, and then threw a cross-court pass to P.J. Tucker for no reason. And you thought in the moment, I mean, read Twitter, listen to the analysts, oh, Harden's not built for this. Like, the moment has gotten too big for him. From that moment forward until the end of the first half, he carried the Rockets offensively and with some great defense at the very end of the first half. And then in the second half, Chris Paul took over. Your 2 stars delivered in the biggest moment of their respective careers. Jenna, the Rockets had to win this game twice because they lost it twice. They lost the game. When you go down 12-0 to the Warriors in Oracle, 99% of the time, that game's over.
Yes.
When you let the Warriors beat you by 15+ in the third quarter, 100% of the time, that game's over. Since Steve Kerr's been there, 51 times they've beaten an opponent by at least 15 points in the third quarter. They were 51-0. The Rockets had to come back twice. They did it, and then they had to pitch a shutout defensively in the fourth quarter. It was a remarkable performance.
Absolutely right. The narrative around this team has always been fantastic in the regular season, but between Mike D'Antoni and Chris Paul and James Harden, come the postseason when the stakes are higher and the stage is a little bit bigger, they don't seem to be able to close it out. But to be able to do it against an offensive juggernaut like the Warriors at Oracle,
yes,
and able to play such incredible defense at the same time, what does it say about how Mike D'Antoni got this team prepared and ready after a 41-point blowout the game before?
It's really something to build on. You know, they needed one win in Oakland. They were able to get that win. Now, this is the kind of things that championships are built on. That being down 12-0. If they're able to get through this series, that will be in a video. Harden getting those 2 steals, getting in the back pocket of the Golden State Warrior, Kevin Durant stealing that, and then stripping Kevin Durant, which I believe him stripping him in the second quarter led to Kevin Durant later on in the game passing to Klay Thompson when Klay wasn't ready, when I thought Durant should have taken the shot there at the end of the game. So those are the types of things that you build a championship on. And now you have it where Houston has wanted this. Nick talked about it just a little bit, didn't want to give it away, and talking to the owner, talking to the general manager, Nick has a relationship with them. They won a 3-game series.
The owner said it. The owner gave it away himself, so now I'm comfortable saying it. The owner was caught by local media leaving the stadium last night. This has been Houston knows Golden State is the most talented team ever put together. They also know basketball, the NBA, is the hardest sport to execute an upset. The longest series, the most scoring opportunities, therefore the lowest variance. What their goal was the moment they acquired Chris Paul. Let's turn the NBA season into a best of 3 with 2 of those games in our building. Tillman Fertitta said it last night. It's what I had been hearing behind the scenes from the team all year long. Let's make it a best of 3. Let's make sure we have home court. They secured home court in the regular season. The best of 3 was looking sketchy when they lose game 1 at home. Now they've done it. Now you see if you can go execute
Even sketchier after getting drilled in game 3.
Getting drilled in game 3, absolutely.
So did these 2 secure their reputation? Can we finally put that behind them now, or do you have to wait and see how they manage this series?
No. You moved it from what they call the back burner to the front burner.
But it's still on the burner.
Because now, if they don't come through, it's just bigger.
Okay.
It's just bigger. If you don't come through in games 5, game 6, or a game 7, yes, the stakes are even higher now. But also, the potential of being able to repair their reputation is at an all-time high also. So they can gain more, but also their reputation is still there in the balance. They're still going against one of the greatest teams that we've ever seen.
And some of this will be what happens in the future will dictate how we look at this Rockets team. And here's what I mean. Let's say the Rockets lose the next 2 games. That will mean they lost Game 5 at home, lose Game 6 on the road. It will feel very disappointing. If a couple years from now, the only team to take the Warriors even 6 is this Rockets team, then we look at it a little bit differently. Also, I think some of the reputation is repaired. It is not championship reparation, if you will, but what James Harden did in the first half, what Chris Paul did after the first quarter, I don't think you can call these guys chokers anymore. I don't think you can say these guys. And D'Antoni, who you bang on, D'Antoni, I think, kept them even keeled throughout the game. If you heard the timeout during the game, CeCe.
I don't have a lot of faith in D'Antoni.
Well, you cannot have a lot of faith in him, and he still might be the right mindset of a coach for these guys. In the third quarter, when the Warriors were going on that insane run, at the end of it, he calls timeout and he says, listen, they made their shots. They went on their run. No problem. Like, that might not be the most inspirational coaching for some guys, but for these guys, they seem to respond to it. They seem to respond to whatever he was telling them before the game. Like, all these guys, if they beat this Warriors team, all of that stuff's gone. And if they take it 7, I think most of it's gone.
Yeah, there's a lot of basketball. All right? Just like Twitter exploded in the first quarter when Harden didn't take that shot, we were right back into it in game number 5. So their reputation, to me, has the chance to be repaired, but it's not repaired yet. Now, the stage is set. The owner talked about they're going to have a special celebration, game number 5, for the people of the senseless killing in Santa Fe. They're going to honor them at the game. So it's going to be an atmosphere that, if you're trying to win a championship, that's the game that they must get there, game number 5 back in Houston.
All right, Rockets now have home court advantage as this series shifts back to Houston for game 5. Coming up, who's facing more pressure tonight in the East, the Cavs or the Celtics? Next on First Things First.
At Buffalo Wild Wings, we'll admit that we often go overboard with our limited time offerings. We just can't help ourselves. Take our new signature sampler. For $15, you get wings and 3 shareable options, like fried pickles or cheese curds. Then there's our aptly named over-the-top nachos, a literal mountain of crispy tortilla chips loaded with your choice of pulled pork or honey barbecue chicken, corn, jalapenos, and more. Then top it all off with our new Platinum Margarita. Go overboard with us today at Buffalo Wild Wings. Wings, beer, sports. Available for a limited time while supplies last. Please drink responsibly.
Get out of here.
The Eastern Conference Finals resume tonight. Boston hosting the Cavs for Game 5. Boston loves playing host. They invite you in, they serve appetizers, make you feel comfortable, and then they beat you. 9-0 at home this postseason, but losers of the last 2 in Cleveland. Celtics have home court advantage. Cavs have LeBron James advantage. So who's got the overall advantage? CeCe, what do the Cavs need to do to win tonight?
Man, they need to take a page out of the old Cavs, 16, all the years before. They need to play some defense. You got to be able to shut people down. Late in the season, that's the thing you can depend on. The stakes are high. There's a lot of pressure. Your shots come and go, as we saw last night with Houston. What did it come down to in the end? You got to be able to stop people. You know that initially that the Celtics are going to come out with a big punch. The Cavs have to try to have some type of advantage in that first quarter. If they're able to negate the energy from the crowd that these younger players play with, I believe that can lead to the Cavs to victory. But it amounts to defense and the type of energy that we saw. I mean, when you have Kyle Korver setting the example for you defensively, him and LeBron James a combined 30 seasons in the NBA, they had the 2 biggest efforts we saw from an effort standpoint of the Cavaliers came from these two players. So follow their example. And it starts on the defensive end, and you got to get it started early there in Boston because the crowd will be amazing tonight.
I'm smiling because I hadn't thought about it that way. Korver and LeBron combined 70 years on Earth.
Yeah.
30 years
You've had
in
a
the
tremendous
NBA.
influence on me being the smartest guy on TV. It make me think outside of what I would normally think about.
I appreciate that, Cece.
Yeah, I was joking.
Okay, so listen, I think the first quarter is critical to Boston because I think the Cavs, I don't think Boston can win this series if they lose this game. I think the Cavs can. I also don't think Boston is equipped to do in Game 5 what they did in Game 2, which is be dominated in the first half and then flip the script entirely in the second half.
You don't think for those role players coming out and seeing Jaylen Brown, seeing Tatum get off the fast starts that they weren't able to do, they know the road record. Like seeing those young players, if Al Horford starts really fast, you don't think that affect the psyche of Cleveland?
No. That's what I'm saying is that's why I'm saying I think the first quarter is critical for Boston. I think Boston has to get out to a fast start.
Right. I think it's critical for Cleveland also. That's what I was trying to counter.
Here's the thing. We have seen Cleveland, whether it was Game 1 against Toronto, whether it was I forget which Pacers game, I think it was Game 5 against Indiana, where they don't start off well, and then once the second unit comes in for the other team and LeBron stays in extended minutes, they can get back within reaching distance, start to figure it out. I think Cleveland, I think there are multiple paths to victory for the Cavs at this point. I think the Cavs right now are feeling better about how they're playing, and they obviously have the best player in the series. I think the Celtics' path to victory is slimmer but much more clear. They have to be extraordinary defensively, and they need to get Al Horford off. Like, period, point blank. They can't have Al Horford be a secondary or tertiary player in this game. He's got to be their best guy. It's got to be Horford, Tatum, Brown, with whatever you get from Rozier being a bonus. That's what the Celtics have to do to win what I feel is the second must-win game they've played in these playoffs, second only, of course, to the Game 7 against Milwaukee.
Can Brad Stevens just go back to Game 1, maybe more so Game 1 than Game 2, and said, just do what we did here. When the pressure wasn't on, when you didn't let LeBron get in your head, when this was just you're going out and playing basketball, coming off the series that you just won, when we hadn't gone to Cleveland and lost 2 games, when Al Horford came out and absolutely dominated. I mean, how hard is it for them to do that?
That was the worst playoff game LeBron's played in over a year.
Yeah, and the problem with game number 1 also is you've played 3 other games. You got 3 other games of intel. So there's only so much you can adjust to and change. Look, in game number 1, the Cavs only scored 83 points. Can they do that again? No, they can't do it again. They're an outstanding defensive team. And the reason why they were so hard to defend for the Cavs was they did a lot of passing, motion, picking until they got the matchup that they wanted. Since then, the Cavs have made adjustments to that. We haven't seen Brad make any counter punch. So the point that Nick and I are trying to make is there's too much information that's been exposed. We've seen the Cavs adjust. That's not a move that they can go back to.
Sure.
I'm also curious if Aaron Baines is going to start. That was an adjustment I thought Brad Stevens might make in Game 4. He didn't. I think he paid for it. Is Aaron Baines going to start? That then forces most likely Tristan Thompson to be guarding Aaron Baines, which gets Kevin Love on Al Horford. Now, you're going to pay the penalty for that on the other end of the court, but it could help get Al Horford off offensively. That's an adjustment I think that is waiting for Brad Stevens. That's the only starting lineup adjustment that I think is out there for him because Rozier's your only healthy point guard, so unless you're going to start Marcus Smart at point guard, which you're not, like you don't have a lot of other potential lineup adjustments.
Yeah, from a defensive standpoint, I would like to see Brad Stevens go back to Marcus Morris being on LeBron early in the game. Get Jaylen Brown, get him off of LeBron so he avoids foul trouble. LeBron is too physical and too smart for those younger players. Later in the game, later in the quarter, you can rotate those guys on LeBron, but that would be one adjustment, Jenna, I would like to see the Celtics make that they did do in game number 1 and were successful the way you mentioned.
And I'm going to add one other thing that I don't know if you'll be into at all, but you've talked a lot about how LeBron, it's all about championships. Your evaluation of him is going to be championships. His evaluation of himself is going to be championships. LeBron, while he's not on social media, he saw the game last night. And I believe, and I think LeBron believes, and I know the people around LeBron believe, if they face the Warriors in the NBA Finals, they're drawing nearly dead. I think they believe they have a path to victory, even if it's a slim one, over Houston. And if Golden State were up 3-1 and about to go make the NBA Finals,
wow. So you're saying, okay, LeBron is 0 dark 30, but the guy that we consider and people have told us he's a basketball savant, he's a fan of the game. He sees the overall picture.
He knows, hold on. We might not be playing. If we make the NBA Finals, it might not be the Warriors. And so LeBron's going to be trying hard no matter what. But it's a different level to me of motivation. If you think I am working my tail off.
I could buy into that.
To just go get my head handed to me by Golden State. As opposed to what I tell you what LeBron doesn't want to have happen is get knocked out by Boston and then see Houston in the NBA Finals and be thinking, did I leave a championship on the board? Is the year that I didn't make the NBA Finals a year we could have beaten the team in the NBA Finals? Now, I'm not saying I'd pick the Cavs over the Rockets, but I know the folks in Cleveland and the folks around LeBron have more faith in their ability to beat Houston, which they think they got a shot at.
They match up better with.
As opposed to Golden State. So I think last night's game actually helped the Cavs tonight.
All right, Game 5 tonight, back in Boston. Coming up, what went wrong for the Warriors in Game 4? It's next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First, some disturbing news to pass along. Milwaukee police released footage from January of an officer using a stun gun on Milwaukee Bucks rookie Sterling Brown. The incident stemmed from a dispute over a potential parking violation. Milwaukee's police chief has apologized to Brown for what he described as inappropriate actions taken by officers. Brown says he plans to file a lawsuit against the department. CC, I'll start with you. What was your reaction to this story and to the footage that we're watching here?
It's not too surprising for me. Most of my adult life, all of my life, I've been aware of bad situations as far as African Americans and police officers. It's been brought to my attention by my mother at a very, very young age, by my sisters and brothers. Then it became real, 1991. That's when we saw Rodney King. So I've been watching videos all my adult life of African Americans being harassed, beat, tased, all types of things, shot to death by officers of the law. So how do I feel about it? The only reason why I probably watched it was because I have to make comments about it on TV. Well, the only reason why they're making comments about it on TV is because he's a professional basketball player. So now we're going to try to act like, oh, we're going to care a little bit. Oh, the media, oh, the public, oh, we care about it because we're fans of sports. People don't care because you know what's going to happen today? Other blacks are going to go about their business and they're going to be harassed the way we have been harassed for a long, long time. The reality of that video is being black in America is totally different than being white in America. So I'm tired of looking at videos of the same thing in 2018 of something that I watched when I was younger as a young person, and I've been watching all my adult life. So people today will care, but ultimately it don't matter if black people care. It only matters if white people care. Because that's the reality that we live with, that I live with every day, that you don't have to live with. Your kids don't have to live with. All right? I've been trained. I trained my kids. I trained all the kids that I coached in little leagues. And the kids who I coached, white kids, I didn't have to tell them these things about police officers because they're not treated that way. Now, I would love to see the reaction, God forbid, if it was Aaron Rodgers. Man, if this was Aaron Rodgers, then I believe something might happen. But no, this is just Sterling Brown, just another black guy. Nothing's going to happen. And save it how much people really, really care. Because I know what people care about. They invest their time and their resources. It's no different than our kids at school. We say that we care, and we keep watching them die every day. We say we care about police brutality, and it happens every day. And what do? We do nothing, because most of the cases, you can't even prosecute the officers. So in this case, let's see what happens in Milwaukee. Let's see if these offers are prosecuted at the full extent of the law. I just challenge white people today. I want you to go to a drugstore. I want you to double park your car. I want you to go in and buy something. And I just wonder, what is the probability of you ending up on your face and end up getting tased? Not real high. But obviously, if I decide to do something like that today, the probability is a lot higher.
Listen, your point on what if it were Aaron Rodgers, it's implausible, if not impossible, that this happens to Aaron Rodgers. Because, listen, we just know there's two sets of laws. There's laws that I get to live by, and there's laws you get to live by. You and I were talking before the show. I at times, sometimes at inopportune times, can have a bit of a smart mouth. And we were talking about if you and I were riding together, and if we get pulled over by the cops, what you would say to me about how I would normally conduct myself as opposed to how I'm going to conduct myself with you next to me. And not because you're Cris Carter, just because you're a black man in America. But anyone thinks that, I'm glad we're playing the video. Maybe there'll be a few people that it shocks them into a realization. But we can just leave it to athletes for a moment. Professor Lou Moore did a great chronology via newspaper articles of this. 1939, Jackie Robinson, traffic violation, gun pulled on him. Jackie Robinson. 1974, your friend Lynn Swann, a red light violation, gets beat by the police. Mid-1970s, Bill Russell in Los Angeles, traffic violation, gun pulled on him. How about just a few years ago in New York City, Thabo Sefolosha standing outside of a club with an altercation he's not involved in. He gets a nightstick to the shin bone and gets it shattered. People don't care. And I will go one step further with it, because this is what is so disheartening. It's worse than people not caring. Since these videos, you mentioned the Rodney King video, but there has been a proliferation of these videos in the last 5 to 6 years thanks to these, right? Thanks to camera phones and cell phones. According to every reputable polling source, white Americans' approval of the police has gone up in this time frame, not down. So the question that is asked is, are the police in these instances acting unlawfully? That's one question. Another question is, are they doing what the communities are actually asking them to do? Are people actually okay with, for black Americans, misdemeanor, if that's not even a crime, double parking, it's a ticket, it's a violation, being punishable by beating, by shooting at times? Because I know what people's response will be. Well, don't double park your car. We theoretically have a system of laws in place in this country where if you commit a crime, you go to trial, you can get, none of those are summarily executed in the street or tased and beat by a half dozen cops because you committed a parking violation. And I just want to add one other thing, because you mentioned the police aren't going to be punished or haven't been punished. They haven't been fired. They haven't, forget being prosecuted. They're all still officers. I hear a lot of people very often say, hey, we all know we have a few bad officers. Few bad apples is how it's put. But let's not lump them all into it. And I can buy into that. But I would request, I would implore, I would beg all the good officers out there, you're allowed to say something. You're allowed to report the bad apples, if you will, because I would argue they make your job more dangerous. The more people are afraid of the police, the more people are on edge around the police, the more at risk the good and the bad, but the good officers are. And so I don't know what it's like to walk in your shoes, see? I have an idea of what it's like to be afraid for my son, but I don't know what it's like to walk in your shoes. But was I surprised? How could you be surprised? It's America in 2018. I don't know how you could be surprised by that happening to anybody, whether he's an NBA player or not.
What I did, I don't want to say what surprised me, but what was very interesting is that he immediately, or shortly thereafter, or as this has sort of unfolded, decided to use this as a teachable moment, if he could. He said, this experience with the police department has forced me to stand up, tell my story so I can help prevent these injustices from happening in the future, which sounds great, and it's wonderful to believe that way and think that way, but we keep hearing these stories happen over and over again. Does he have a responsibility as an athlete, Chris, to somehow share his story over and over? Is there anything that will change by him doing that?
Nothing's going to change, Jenna. Like, they can stop fooling themselves, all right? Why, as an athlete, should I have more responsibility than other citizens?
Just because people are listening. This story is going to be shared more because he is an athlete.
Is Sterling Brown, is he more important? Is his life more important than anyone else that's died or been? No.
Of course not.
No, so no, I'm not going to put the responsibility on athletes. You know the reason why? Because athletes aren't in control. They don't control the laws, all right? They don't see what's put on the bill for people to vote on. No, the pressure is not on athletes. The pressure is on the same people that's been on for 50 years. It's on white people, all right? All right? Stop locking black people up. Stop harassing. Stop profiling. You know, because after today, Sterling's going to say his piece. But you know something? I got 7 brothers and sisters. I got a mother. No matter where they go, they're going to be damn terrified. You know the reason why? Because of white officers and them harassing them. And to think that some basketball player is going to stand up and it's going to change their life of my nieces and my nephews? No. You know my niece today, Pierre? She's going to go somewhere and her husband, they're going to be terrified if they get stopped. My nephew, my great-nephew, Tyler, you know what's going to happen to him? Sterling Brown, he's got a platform. My nephew, Tyler, don't have no platform. So, no, let's stop moving the burden on professional athletes. No, it's not their burden. It's up for white people to be able to change something.
The people in power obviously have the responsibility to make a change if they want to. And the last thing I'll say is this. For as long as there have been police in this country and black people in this country, black people have said the police treat us differently. And for an incredibly long period of time, white people, either publicly, politicians, newspaper editors, or just your neighbor, said, we don't believe you. We don't believe you. Prove it. And then everyone got these phones, and it started being indisputable. It started to be provable. And what was, in general terms, the white people in power's reaction to it? To double down. Well, act better, comply, don't break the law, don't have a broken taillight, don't double park. Instead of saying, oh my God, we are so sorry. We didn't know what it was like. We're sorry we didn't believe you. And so if countless videos aren't going to change people's opinion with respect, whether that was Sterling Brown, Giannis, or Chris Middleton, his teammate, who's going to join us shortly, or if it was Chris Carter walking out of the building today, nothing's going to change people's opinion on this unless they want it to be changed.
I'm going to tell you what's going to change. We're going to move on from this topic. We're going to change to something else. And I'm going to go about my life and my family's life, and it's going to be exactly the same damn way. That's what's going to happen.
All right, we're going to break there. We have much more First Things First after the break. Stay with us. The Cavaliers fell to the Boston Celtics last night, 96-83. They're now down 3-2 in the series, with LeBron and Kevin Love being the only starters to score field goals in the first half. The Cavs supporting cast was, well, let's call it below subpar. Nick, what happened to the rest of the Cavaliers not named LeBron and Kevin?
I don't know. I don't know how George Hill doesn't attempt a three-pointer. I don't know how J.R. Smith effectively lights himself on fire midway through the first quarter, and Ty Lue doesn't put Kyle Korver in the game. I don't know how Jordan Clarkson, once again, gets 10 shots up in 15 minutes. As bipolar, I shouldn't use that term, as hot and cold as the Celtics have been home and road, the Cavs role players have been similar game to game, not necessarily determined on where the game is being played.
Not just the postseason, since the trade.
Throughout the regular season, absolutely.
Yeah, that's why we shouldn't be surprised. That's the reason why I said Cleveland's not a great team. They got the best player, but it's not a great team. And the reason, because those other people, the inconsistency, when you talk about a critical game number 5 in Boston, and they're starting backcourt and George Hill and JR, I mean, JR had more fouls, well, I think he had 4, than he had points, assists, rebounds, and steals. He had 5 fouls. He had 5 fouls, yeah, because he almost broke his leg on the 1 foul. Yeah, he had 5 fouls, but less points, rebounds. He made 1 field goal. I mean, 1 field goal as a starter in the NBA and you're playing 30 minutes, like, that's just, it's uncalled for. And with Rodney Hood being down and them really having no answer, like, man, this is what I hate to say I expected to see. And this is the reason why I didn't predict that the Cavs and LeBron would make it to their 8th straight final.
I mean, this has been the reason why going into the Toronto series, you thought Toronto could win that series. You thought that if they got Philly, you thought Philly would be
any
terrible.
of those teams I would have picked over the Cavs.
Over the Cavs. And my guess is, we haven't talked about it yet, my guess is right now you feel like Boston's going to win this series.
Right. I told you yesterday, at the end of the first quarter, I would tell you the team in control of the series. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's like, yeah, I know you go back to Cleveland for 1 game. I know Game 7 for LeBron. But this team in the Celtics plays so much better at home. And knowing that they're going to have at least another 3 and plus another 7 quarters there, yes, that's why I have the Celtics.
Here's why this is so concerning, and I'll leave it at this. Because of what happened in Game 2 in Boston. Because I believe the Cavs are going to win when they go back home. Boston's been terrible on the road. The Cavs have been good at home. They lost first home playoff game of this season, and that's it. But we saw in Game 2, LeBron go to Boston, put up a 42-point triple-double, and lose. Why? Because all of his other teammates were terrible. Like, I think we can rely on LeBron in the Game 7 that I think is going to happen being great. Someone else has to be at least okay.
Good. Even okay.
Oh, and I mean, they haven't had a single Cav not named LeBron score 15 points in the last 3 games.
Look, this is also the team that on the off chance they get by Boston, you said that the one team they probably would want to match up with is Houston. There's no way that team that you saw last night can hang with the
Absolutely
Houston Rockets.
They better not be thinking ahead of the next 5 minutes.
Right. All right, speaking of what's going on out west, we wanted a series there, and while it wasn't always pretty, it was a little lopsided at times, a little messy. It's exactly what we got. Rockets and Warriors all tied up at 2 games apiece after Houston stole a road win on Tuesday. That series now shifts back to Houston tonight for Game 5, where the Warriors have listed both Andre Iguodala and Klay Thompson as questionable with injuries. Here's Draymond Green on the Warriors' mindset heading into the game.
Kind of pissed off. You know we let one slip away. So definitely guys are pissed off, but encouraged as well. I love the way this team responds when our back is against the wall. I don't mind our backs being against the wall because I know, what we're capable of, and I know the level of focus and intensity level that this team's bring when that is the case. So, it is what it is. I think we blew a golden opportunity, but it's not one that we can't get back. We know we can go get it back, so it's no panic.
If I may, I just have a question. How does Draymond know how this team responds when their back's up against the wall? Since they got Kevin Durant,
they've never had their backs up.
They've never had their backs up against the wall.
The closest they've come was Draymond right there with his back up against a wall for that interview.
They've never trailed in a series. This is the first series they've even ever been tied in. They've never faced anything more than a sweep or a 5-game series. How does he know how they respond?
I think that Draymond and some of the nucleus players, they've been through enough stuff internally. Even like when they were bored during the season, there's certain little struggles, little challenges that you have as a team. So I could see why Draymond would be, yes, everything that we have faced. Now, if you haven't faced what people call real adversity compared to everything they have been, it's adversity to them. So you can create a world in your mind and transfer that to the other players. So yes, they have faced adversity in their own mind. If it's not from a PR standpoint, it's other things. The world hates the Warriors.
Sure.
Okay, so I believe that this is not something made up. This is real. Kevin Durant, he's faced adversity. Draymond's faced adversity, and they faced it this year, not playing up to the level of their expectations.
What do you expect to see tonight in this game, Nick?
Man, the one game the Rockets haven't had yet this series, and I would imagine if they're going to have it, it would be at home and not in a Game 7, so it would be tonight, is the three-point avalanche. Like, when you're trying to figure out how can the Rockets win 4 of 7 against Golden State, one of the games you bake into it is, they have a 21 of 44 night from 3, and nobody in the NBA loses that game. Doesn't matter who you are. You hit more than 19 threes in a game unless your opponent does the same. You win that game literally like 98% of the time. So I think that is what I'm obviously the Rockets' game plan isn't going to be, we're just not going to miss any threes, but we haven't seen that yet from what is the most prolific three-point shooting team in the history of the league. That's what I think we're going to see tonight.
In my sports history, and the higher the stakes, the less my expectations on expertise, because the pressure and the level of energy and defense that teams play, that being in football or being in basketball. I never expect an exceptional performance late in the year and in championship. The reason why? There's too much pressure. The reason why? The defense and the attention to detail, especially when you get into a series, it's hard to get all those open looks when this is Game 5. They've seen you 4 times in the last week and a half. So I never have those high expectations for guys in a championship level. I expect this to be a struggle. And I told Nick this before. Basketball, now Draymond said something. Basketball is not a game you can play mad. Now, Draymond can because he doesn't have to shoot the ball. To rebound, to screen, to do all the grunt work, you can play mad. You can be pissed. But Kevin Durant pissed? It's not in him. Clay injured? It's not in him. Steph, I mean, even if he is pissed or mad, what's he going to do? Like, they're not that type of physical team. So I'm going to watch Draymond. I'm just going to watch the emotion and see how he tries to channel that to these other guys who aren't mad or guys who play with that type of chip.
Yeah. And, Jenna, if one of those two guys you listed as questionable misses the game, in Iggy or Clay, and once again, with just one day off between games, all these guys got to play 40-plus minutes after traveling from the Bay to Houston. That's something Golden State has not had to deal with. That's something this iteration of Golden State has no experience with. 2 games in 3 days where your starters are all playing 40-plus minutes. They're not used to that.
Yeah, it was a small thing, but in watching the video that you had broke down as far as Kevin Durant and that last sequence of plays, another thing that's a real thing I want to watch tonight's game, if these guys are injured, whoever's on the court, we do realize that whoever's on the court has not played significant minutes with the stars, with Kevin Durant, with Steph. And you could see Shaun Livingston. In the last play, Shaun Livingston goes right down the middle and is in the middle of the lane. Now, if Andre Iguodala's on the court, he goes to the right corner. So watch these other players, and watch as we get into critical situations. Do they know what to do because they haven't been in them a lot?
But Klay Thompson does know what to do, was in, and we saw him limping around in that last game. So let's see how much he can actually contribute.
Absolutely.
Again, both Iggy and Klay Thompson listed as questionable for Game 5. All right, coming up, Mark Schlereth is here. That's all we have to say. That's it. That's the tease. That's why you should come back next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First, we are joined now by Fox NFL analyst Mark Schlereth.
What up, Stink? Good to see you.
Good to see you guys. Good to be on the program. It's great. It's great. Things are good.
Good. That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
NFL, that's what I wanted to know, that you're great.
All right, I'm out.
Good. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah.
NFL owners unanimously approved a national anthem policy yesterday. The policy requires players to stand if they're on the field with the option to stay in the locker room during the anthem. Teams will be fined if their players or personnel do not follow the new protocol. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell said, quote, "We want people to be respectful of the national anthem." Mark Schlereth, I'll start with you. What do you make of this new anthem policy?
Well, I mean, again, the narrative on this whole scenario was never about disrespecting the national anthem or the flag. And I listened to your eloquent conversation about Sterling Brown, and I told you in the hallway, I have never one time in my life thought about telling my kids what to do in case they were pulled over, because there is a difference in the way white people and black people are treated by the police. So it's never even crossed my mind to have that conversation with my kids, and that breaks my heart that my African-American friends have had to have, every one of them I know have had to have that conversation. And that's sad. And so this has never been about disrespecting our national anthem. As a matter of fact, it was a sit-down by Colin Kaepernick originally, and Nate Boyer, Green Beret Nate Boyer, is the one who
cajoled him into
kneeling. To say, hey, kneel, because it's not disrespectful.
We would see it more of a sign of respect.
Right. And so, but again, the narrative, right? What was the tee-up question that you just asked me? What was the narrative is that it's disrespectful to our country or to our anthem, and that has never been the intent from Colin Kaepernick or any of the other players. It's really to draw awareness to what we just saw with Sterling Brown, who on a traffic violation got tased by the Milwaukee police. That's what this whole thing has been about from the start. And I understand being a business owner. You understand being a business owner. If things on the surface, even perception becomes reality. So if the perception by the American people and by our president and everybody else saying this is disrespectful, everybody buys into that, well, then that hurts your business. And I understand from an owner standpoint, they're concerned about their business, as well they should be. But again, the narrative has become disrespect, and it really has never been about that from the player standpoint.
It's been even the way most shows or whatever, news or sports, put it on the screen. Anthem protests is how it's been. That's not what they're protesting. Right. If someone does a march, that is not a traffic protest. Like that, they're just marching through the streets. This is so frustrating because I do understand that because the discussion has been hijacked, because the discussion became this is disrespect of the troops, even though you have countless troops, active service members saying, I kneel in solidarity with the NFL players, that it's been disrespectful of the anthem, even though you have every player, every single player that has taken a knee or was sitting or raising a fist has gone out of their way to say, we are not disrespecting. We are not disrespecting the country. We are striving for a better country. But you're right that it has been hijacked to a degree to where that is how people view it. So I also understand why the owners would say, listen, we're not in the protest business. We're in the football business, and we think this is hurting our bottom line. What is so incredibly frustrating to me is I truly believe in my heart that the people angriest about this, the loudest people, whether it's politicians or football fans or just television viewers, they are not angry about how the players are protesting. They are angry about what is being protested. I think because if this were the exact same thing, sitting and then kneeling, and Colin Kaepernick and the other players were asked, why are you doing this? And the answer was, I'll be honest with you, I think our troops who return home from war defend that flag more than anyone. I think they are mistreated. I think the VA system's a mess. I don't think we take care of them. And I won't stand for the flag until we stand for them. The people angriest about the disrespect of the flag would be standing and applauding. The problem is not the method of protest. The problem has always been what they're protesting. And there's always been resistance in this country from the predominantly white power structure to any form of black protest advocating for equal rights. And the anger gets even greater when it's theoretically black folks who have made it, prominent black people, when the answer's always been, what do you got to be mad about? You're rich, you're famous, you could be a pro football player. Ignoring the fact that there's irony's not lost on me. Sterling Brown might not be rich yet, but NBA player, none of it matters. None of it changes in those moments for what they're protesting. And so I understand why the NFL did what they did. It breaks my heart that in this country this couldn't have been a unifying thing. It breaks my heart that people couldn't say we all should strive for a more just place, a more just police force, a more just treatment of all of our citizens. But we're not there. We're not even close to being there.
No, we're not there. I'm not surprised. I know the ownership of the National Football League. This is what I expected them to do. And I expected them to try to do it also without it being collectively bargained. You know, I can understand them with being the owners of the business. They could do what's best for the business. But you're in business with the players. It's a partnership. Everything's been collectively bargained. And to think that you could change the rules without them having some type of say, I'm not surprised at all. But at this point, last year, the owners did something monumental. They made a contribution, almost $100 million to the Players Coalition, to all the causes, to all these players, Malcolm Jenkins, Doug Baldwin, all the great things these guys are doing. Now, it's just going to be just an afterthought. Like, we'll never talk about that contribution they made because it should have been followed up with something. Their $90 million should have been followed up with a policy that took the players' voice in mind, that they did care. So for me, just like the Sterling Brown, this is just evidence. I know that they don't care. I know they don't care. And yesterday what they did was even more evidence of that.
What about the policy itself? Is there anything to the fact that players are allowed to stay in the locker room, or if they want to protest, can stay in the locker room, that now this turns maybe a little bit more turmoil rather than unity because you're going to have different fractions on teams who are in and are out? I mean, does it actually solve the issue that the NFL intended to when it was first laid out?
Well, the issue certainly won't be solved. I mean, they're just trying. I mean, the $90 million looks more like hush money than it looks like a partnership now. Yes. Right? Just keep your mouth shut. Here's $90 million, and let's make sure that we don't mess with our business. I don't believe that. I mean, if a bunch of guys are out of the locker room, you know, we'll have counters. You know, we'll have somebody going, okay, you know, so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so was not out there, you know. And so I don't think it alleviates the issue. It puts.
So what does it do?
It closes a drape on a messy bedroom. It closes the door. People come over to your house and your kid's bedroom's a mess and you ask them to clean up and they didn't. What do? Do you leave the doors open or do you shut them? You shut them and say, oh, that room's off limits right now. And that's really what it does. It's closing the drapes so you can't see our dirty laundry.
And this issue will continue to be exploited for profit and for divisive purposes from people who think they can benefit from it. There will be people counting who is out of the locker room, who is not, because for good or for bad, the most powerful person in this country, the President of the United States, he said this morning, right after the show started, that if you're not standing for the anthem, not only should you not be able to play in the NFL, maybe you shouldn't be allowed to live in the country. Mm-hmm. The belief is that this is a winning issue, and that pointing out the ungrateful black athlete is a winning political issue. So if there's guys in the locker room, we'll know who they are. They'll be pointed out, and this doesn't solve anything. It might be the drape, but it's a drape with a hole in it, like that people can still see in there.
If the NFL, if they cared, you know what they do? Because right now the owners, they want to make everyone think they're more patriotic than the players, and that's a bunch of bull. You know what the owners are doing? You know what the Park Avenue NFL office is doing? They're taking money from the military. That's why they got the people standing up. They in partnership with the military. The military is paying them to have those flags, to have the soldiers on every field. Why don't we talk about that more? The NFL is benefiting from this. And based on what you said, if I got a call from Washington, D.C. right now, and they were congratulating me on something, I would consider that to be fool's gold.
All right, we'll leave it there. Mark, stick around. We're back with more First Things First right after this. Le'Veon Bell with a no-show at Steelers OTAs yesterday. He remains unsigned after receiving a second consecutive franchise tag. According to teammate Antonio Brown, that's a bad idea. Brown said, quote, "You can't make anything better without showing up. That is my mantra every day on this show." Stink, how big of a deal is it for a player to basically shame another player about missing OTAs?
Oh, a guy that has his money going to shame somebody that doesn't have his. Like that's inappropriate. Like, you can't do that. That's one of those things. That's one of those locker room violations that you should never do. And all we have to do is look to Los Angeles and the Chargers with Hunter Henry. That's why you don't show up. Because what are the odds of you getting paid if you tear your ACL in some voluntary workout? Mm-hmm. Playing some football, doing some football drills, tear your ACL, then what are the odds of you getting a long-term contract, especially at that position, the running back position? I mean, he's already been around. He's already had the wear and tear. Like, yes. That's ridiculous. And Antonio Brown ought to keep his mouth shut when it comes to other people's money. You got yours.
I feel like this is a code that you keep to even post-career, to a degree, as far as chastising guys for getting money. I talk about NFL salaries a lot because it's a hard-capped league. And I think it matters. Like, money spent here is money that therefore can't be spent there. And this is something that about my commentary has always rubbed you the wrong way. Like, it does seem to me like there's a rule amongst players. Like, we want everyone to be as rich as possible for as long as possible, and don't count my money. Like, that's the message I've gotten from you, which is why I was shocked that Antonio Brown, who's the highest paid receiver in the history of football, is going to go after any of his teammates who has yet to get a long-term contract.
Yeah, I mean, this is a cardinal sin. You don't talk about other people's money. And it just speaks to Pittsburgh. There's a lot of things. Well, why haven't they won a championship? Well, you know something? Talking about another star player's money when you have long-term security, doing that in the offseason, where we could have been talking about 100 other things today in the Pittsburgh Steelers, but some type of way, they always manage to get themselves, like, once a month. Ben Roethlisberger, I ain't helping out the rookies. They think they know everything, don't need my help. And then we got another star player talking about another star player. So this, to me, as the world turns, this happens to be the Pittsburgh Steelers that are very, very talented.
We saw it all year last year. There were 27 stories about the Steelers. 26 of them were not even football related.
Not only last year, Jenna, since this collection of players, all right? This is the only time in Pittsburgh Steelers history that you have all these little subplots, all these other agendas coming out of the locker room. And I believe It's a team sport.
Right.
All right? It affects the bottom line.
Here's the deal, and Herm Edwards used to say this to me all the time. He goes, you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen.
I was going to ask about Tom.
So, it comes down, to me, it comes from the top. It comes down to Mike Tomlin. You either have to say, we're not going to do this anymore, or they're going to be real consequences.
What do those look like?
What is a real consequence?
Well, let's get an example. Okay. The Giants' new coach,
Pat Shermer.
Pat Shermer. They had a player who commented. It was Landon Collins. He commented on the tackle
Eric Flowers, yeah.
Not being at OTAs. He said he's not here because he's mad because we signed Eric. The coach said the next day in the press conference, I told Landon, don't talk about another player. Don't let either the player's not here, either allow me or the organization to talk about it. It's not your job to comment about players and why or why not they're here.
But isn't that Mike Tomlin's thing? Mike Tomlin's like, yeah, let's own it. Let's embrace the fact that this is a sort of a dysfunctional family, if you will. It sort of worked for us the last couple of years. Look how deep we go. We're consistently good. So let them have their whatever they want to do, and when we get out on the field, we're going to go play football. Hasn't that sort of been the way Mike Tomlin has coached this team?
There's no question. And you can talk about one of the most talented teams in the league for sure, but one of the most talented teams we've ever seen here in the last decade that doesn't have a ring. To show for it in the last 5 or 6 or 7. I don't remember when exactly the last time the Pittsburgh Steelers won a world championship, but it's been a while, and they haven't done it with this collection.
Before they had El Bell, before they had Antonio Brown.
Right.
It was Big Ben was there, and Mike Tomlin was there, but that's basically it as far as the key components go. And there's earlier we were talking about LeBron, and you were like, everyone says he played terribly. He did have 26, 10, and 5. Well, that was below what the expectations were for him. There are 28 teams in the league that would love to have the Pittsburgh Steelers' success over the last 5 years. The problem is there's 30 or 31 teams in the league that have less talent than Pittsburgh. Like when you talk about overall offensive firepower, I think it's the best. It could be the best offense in the league. It's the only team in the league that has a consensus top 5 quarterback, running back, and wide receiver. It also has an entrenched head coach, has an excellent home field advantage, has a division where you get 2 free wins every year against the Browns. Like, there are a lot of edges you have in Pittsburgh, and they haven't fully explored. I thought they would last year. I thought they could win the Super Bowl last year.
Right. Let me give you one of the most regal people I've ever been around in my entire life is Joe Gibbs, my first head coach. And Joe Gibbs used to say this all the time, and it holds true. And it holds true through I was blessed to be on 3 championship teams. He used to say that talent will make plays in the first 3 quarters, and great character will win games in the 4th quarter. And the problem that you get into when you have a collection of talent that cares more about itself than it cares about the collective of the team is that when the going gets tough, you're worried about you as opposed to us. And when you're not worried about us, guess what you don't do? You don't win championships. And that's the bottom line. And that, to me, is the Pittsburgh Steelers' problem. They have a championship organization at the top. They have a championship level of talent throughout their team, but they don't have a championship attitude that permeates that team, and that starts from the coach.
Mark, you have a championship attitude. We love it.
Absolutely.
It makes us happy. You got the hardware to prove it. Thank you so much, as always. Love having you here.
Always good to be with you guys.